you see any disgruntled employees come in, then don't sit there.
And that one, I don't think it was actually. I think it's all in here.
Okay. No,
It was
there was another one that we did over there.
the joint one. Is that what
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's meeting of the Yountville Town Council. Welcome, Steve. Let the record reflect, it is Tuesday, what is it? Tuesday, April 7th, 2010 at 6 p.m. For those of you joining us for the very first time in council chambers this evening, you'll find the agendas and all the supporting documentation for those agenda items on the wall in the little plastic bins by the door where you came in, so help yourself to that information. We are being broadcast live on Channel 28, and we are also being broadcast on the Town of Yountville's website, so we will be live video streaming this evening. You can log in to the town's website at www.townofyountville.com, click on the Town Council tab, then select Agendas and Minutes. You will be able to select tonight's meeting and view us live. Is that exciting? And it will be recorded for posterity. This session will be replayed, the video will be replayed on Channel 28 on Friday at noon. And one more housekeeping item before we get started this evening. We would appreciate it if you would turn off your cell phones and pagers while you are in council chambers this evening. Thank you very much. May we have the roll, please?
Councilmember Dutton?
Here.
Councilmember Chilton?
Here.
Councilmember Moeller?
Here.
Vice Mayor Dunbar?
Here.
Mayor Sosserman?
Here. At this time, would you please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance? Item 4, closed session. Is there any reportable action from the closed session report of March 17th?
No.
Thank you. Item 5, adoption of the agenda for this evening. Are there any changes or corrections to tonight's agenda?
I'll move for adoption of the agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. That motion carries. The agenda is adopted as stated. Item 6 is public comment. Anyone from the public wishing to comment on anything that is not on tonight's agenda. Yes, ma'am.
Good evening. My name is Carla Reif, R-E-Y-F-F, 2 F's and 2 Franks. I live on 11 Forester Lane in Yountville, and I'm here tonight to make a request. In view of the fact that you have a new fiscal officer, I believe that's you, and that we're going to be having budget hearings, when is that coming up? Early in the summer?
May 1.
That I thought this might be the opportunity to talk about positions. I refer back to a time about 5 years ago when I testified before this board about a $90,000 temporary position to handle the water problems in Yountville. And at that time, I testified and said there was nothing more permanent in government than a temporary position. Now, I see in the Yountville Sun that you're seeking applicants for what I believe was that position, and it no longer pays $90,000 a year. It now pays between $109,000 and $125,000 a year. So this makes me think that this might be a good time to request that the council or the finance director make some sort of a list of all the positions that you have for the town of Yountville, full or part-time, the costs for these positions, including salaries, benefits, and attendant costs, such as their health benefits after they retire or their retirement costs. I would also like to see in this document something that might list what you have as personal services positions, like I believe the town attorney isn't an employee, but she does have some sort of a personnel contract, and there might be someone else like that, which are really positions, but they're paid in other ways. And I think it would be nice if the citizens of Yountville could see this in a clear, simple format, in language that people can understand and read, and not in the budget document. I've tried to read your budget document, and it's very nice. But budget documents really don't lend themselves to lay people in the town to understand what it is. And I've put all my requests in writing, which I'll turn in so that you can see exactly what I've asked for, and I would hope that you would address this issue and give us a little bit more understanding about the increasing costs that we will be addressing when you have your budget hearings, and especially during this time of fiscal uncertainty. Okay? Any questions of me?
Thank you for your comments. You can hand the list to the clerk.
Thank you.
This is public comment. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
My name is Donna Hine, 6424 Washington Street, Space 38. I'm a resident of Gateway Mobile Home Park. I've never been able to understand why they call them mobiles, because there's no way you could ever move them out of there, but we're stuck with the name. I'm here representing the residents of Gateway and also speaking as the president of our association. We have been watching with great concern and growing concern to what has been happening in American Canyon with their mobile home park, one in particular where there is an attempt being made to change the home from a senior home to a family unit. We have two parks in this town which are both senior units, in other words, over 55, not geared to children, not developed with children in mind, parking, etc. We don't know what you have in the way of protection for the people in our park. We don't know whether there's an ordinance, whether there's some zoning. We're here to ask you, please, to prepare. We don't want to come after the fact. We want to appeal to you to take action before there is a need. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else? Steve?
Steve Rosa, 6468 Washington Street, Space 2. As a mobile home park resident, I'm also concerned about the goings-on in American Canyon and how they could essentially affect us sometime in the future. If you look at the past performance of our park owners in regards to the floodwall project and the Rancho de Napa clubhouse collapse, I think we can see a pattern of disconcern by the owners toward the residents and the town in general. And also, and with these ongoing problems, I wouldn't want, say, an unscrupulous owner to come in and actually change the use of our mobile home parks. I think it would be in bad form, and I think it's time that the town council and staff actually looked into some sort of local regulation to protect our mobile home parks. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Comment on anything that's not on tonight's agenda? All righty. Seeing none, I'll close the public comment. Item 7, approval of consent calendar. Are there any changes or corrections to tonight's consent calendar?
Mayor Sossaman, I'd like to just let the record reflect that I'm going to be abstaining on item F.
All right. Any other changes, corrections, updates? Can I have a motion?
A motion to approve consent calendar items A through F.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And the record will reflect the abstention from Councilmember Mueller on item F. Item 8, presentations. ARG presentation regarding Town Hall seismic retrofit and space needs project. Do we have a staff report?
Very briefly, this is a presentation. As the council knows, we commissioned ARG, also known as Architectural Resource Group, to do an analysis of the condition of Town Hall, especially knowing that we are in an unreinforced masonry building. This is the seat of local government, and also to look at the physical condition of the building what it would take to bring this building up to a safe operational standpoint, and more importantly, what are the space needs for the nature of the local government that this community needs at this point in time and going forward. And today I'm very pleased to introduce Naomi and her team, and she's got a presentation that will take through that. There's no direct action tonight from the council, and then based on some feedback, we'll be meeting with the ad hoc committee to discuss next steps. And with that, Naomi.
Hi, I'm Naomi Marolio with Architectural Resources Group, and it's been a pleasure over the past many months working together with Steve and Bob and the rest of the staff here at the Town Hall. So what I'd like to do today is kind of bring you through the whole process of what we've been doing and some of the conclusions we've drawn and what we've relied on to prepare some of the concept plans for the Town Hall. So let me get my directions. Hi. Great. So I wanted to start with what the project goals are. And number one is to assess the existing condition. So we always want to start there with a historic building and find out what you have and what's working and what's not working. Secondly, we did a space needs analysis. So looked at how the current spaces were functioning, what was working or not working, and also did a look ahead to project what might be the needs in the 5 and 10 year kind of outlook. So not just designing for today's needs. And then last, we developed 3 concept alternatives, and based on both the existing condition and then the space needs. So starting with the existing conditions, in general, the building is in good condition, the envelope of the building. It's been well maintained, and you don't have a lot of typical issues that we might see from a building this age. And so, you know, you should be applauded for that, taking care of this building. The, actually, I don't know if I can go back. We had trouble on my rehearsal going backwards. But the other thing I wanted to mention that's outside of this view is we didn't specifically evaluate the temporary structure because it's kind of beyond its useful life, and we knew that the intention was not to keep it. So just to make that note. In terms of systems, I think you would, it was very predictable. Many of the systems are outdated and not functioning as well as they could be, and needing probably wholesale upgrade. And then we have the typical problems that you have in a building of this age, where some things are working, some things are not, just enough to annoy you, but maybe not to make anybody do anything about it. There were 2 things that struck us as we were looking at the building. And one is, this is supposed to illustrate the electrical condition, and this actually came up after our conditions assessment was complete. But there have been 2 incidences of electrical fires since we started the project, and that's a great cause of concern. And we actually we were provided some props here, but if that were to have happened, this was actually from Bob's office, and if this were to have happened on a weekend, it would have progressed, you know, much further before anything could have been done. So that is causes us a great deal of concern, because if you have a leaky pipe, it's obvious, and you can find that. With electrical, it's hidden in the walls, and it's harder to detect. We can tell you if your service size is deficient, but if you have, you know, connection problems, it's very hard to detect. So that was one of our causes of concern, and then the other was the construction system of the building. And as Steve mentioned, it is an unreinforced masonry building, but it's a specific type of masonry, and that's hollow clay tile. and it's a very brittle building material, and it's hollow. These are ungrouted. And so in terms of levels of safety for unreinforced masonry buildings, brick masonry actually gives you a little bit more mass and stability. The hollow clay tile behaves very poorly in earthquakes, and it is the construction of the exterior walls that are holding up the roof. And so it's a cause of concern. I don't want to be overly dramatic, but yeah, we don't run across it that often as the, what's holding up the roof. In fact, this is just slide. I couldn't access the clay tile here for a picture, but we see it quite a bit for interior partition walls in historic buildings for fireproofing. So moving on to the programming and the space needs assessment, Kathleen Malmstrom, who is the project manager but is on vacation today, came and interviewed everyone here, and there was a form that everybody filled out so that we could get information on individuals' specific needs, storage, common use spaces, that type of thing. And not surprisingly, we determined that it was very overcrowded conditions here, and I think that's not a surprise to anybody. But we also were able to get specific information on if we were to design a solution here, what size would be appropriate, what adjacencies would be appropriate. And so we recorded all of this information and then summarized it in the optimum square footages for each department. And what I wanted to point out is that what's very specific to the town hall and other city, buildings is that it's very departmental based. So it's not just enough to provide the square footage that is necessary, but we need to provide it, the community development and public works, they need proximity to each other. So it, as we move forward with the plans, we like to look at, these are all to scale. So the administrative offices are, the highest need for square footage. The council chambers, public spaces are very close. And then some of the way these others cluster. So we use this information.
Can I ask a quick question on that? Is the library included?
Can I go backwards? I don't know.
Is the library included in this bubble area?
No, the library wasn't included because it is, because that room is available for putting another department in because they're relocating.
Okay. So this is only existing departments that are here?
Yeah. It's only for the people who are remaining.
Okay.
But if you look, that kind of is relevant as we look. This is your existing condition plan, and the area where people are moving out of is this area and then the library, so that is room for expansion. And when we looked at the building, originally it was a grammar school, so you can still see how the original organization worked, where there was a corridor right through here that accessed 3 main classrooms, and this was the admin area, and the building extended to here. So that kind of provided us some clues on how best to possibly organize the circulation through the building in the alternatives. So we looked at 3 alternatives. One is a 2-story option. The idea was to provide a little more space with a little less footprint, and then we provided 2 1-story alternatives that have slight variations. And all of them pretty much, this is, given that this was being removed, we felt like that was a natural location for expanding the building. So this is scheme 1. It is the 2-story option, and the tone is the existing building minus the portable, and the addition is situated here. Again, it's a 2-story addition, so we have stair and elevator. One of the ideas was you have this court kind of area. The idea was to enclose that as a lobby and use that for access to this new addition. And the council chambers, in this scheme, the council chambers is on the second floor of this addition, so that lobby would serve. This is showing how the departments lay out, because it is important. That was one of our challenges for how the departments laid out. So we would still maintain this entrance into an administrative lobby. This is the administrative kind of department. This would be the community development offices. And the purple areas are shared, so all departments share these spaces. And then the council chambers were located on the second floor, and with some storage and an office. And the advantage to this scheme was that it took up a little bit less footprint than if it's a one-story addition. And we were a little bit surprised that, given that it's the largest scheme that we developed, that it really didn't provide as much as we expected. And I think part of that is because the departments tend to want to be together. And so by putting, we had to put the council chambers on the second floor. And this is an elevation, a concept elevation of what that scheme could look like. Again, this is enclosing this kind of courtyard area as a lobby, and then the two-story space. This would be the stair area to kind of break up the mass of the two-story addition. And so that is scheme 1. Scheme 2 is all on one floor. The council chambers would stay in this area, but would be totally remodeled and unrecognizable. And we would also capture what's a closet area now, and originally has always been a closet area, on the west end of the room. Actually, let me move to this colored scheme. So again, an entrance to this public area would be underneath the bell tower. This is new restrooms adjacent to the council chambers, and then a public lobby for daytime use and for access to the counters and to the departments would be in this enclosed court area. So we've taken advantage of this area in each of the schemes. This is the administrative functions, and then we have the community development and public works here with the shared spaces. And I'm thinking the advantages to this is it all fit together fairly nicely in terms of the size of the departments and the access and adjacencies. And then this is a concept elevation. This one we looked at what a contextual, something that is most compatible to the original building would look like, again enclosing some kind of glazed enclosure for the lobby area here. So scheme 3 is fairly similar, except we put the council chambers in the new addition area. Again, the shaded color is all existing. And taking advantage of this lobby area for access to the council chambers and the other public spaces with the restrooms. The daily use lobby would be close to where it is right now. Again, entrance through the bell tower area or entrance. And this is public works and community development, again, administrative offices, and then the purple are the shared functions. This had some advantages for a new council chamber, and it would be possible in all of these schemes to have nighttime access to the council chamber. And then this is a concept elevation for this scheme, imagining some kind of maybe cast artwork component for the wall, but this is the council chambers as a separate kind of element within the addition, as opposed to having something that's a little more contextual. So in addition to the concept plans for architectural concept plans, we did also have structural, mechanical, electrical, plumbing engineers all develop plans. I'm only really going to touch on the structural because there's a couple of alternatives that they studied and that I think are worth presenting. And we'll just look at them in these wall sections. Alternative 1, and I'm hoping that this will be, if the gray area is the hollow clay tile wall and the existing foundation, one of the proposals is very, very simple. It is constructing a wood frame wall on the inside all around the perimeter of the building. And we included this on its own new foundation. And that would be enough to stabilize the hollow clay tile walls. We included this in alternative 1. We are a little concerned about giving up 6 inches of floor space in some of the rooms. The way they lay out, it's fairly tight. So we didn't show it in all of the schemes. But it is the most cost-effective and simplest to construct. Another alternative is to do concrete work inside the hollow clay tile wall. And so you have to remove some of it and then install some rebar and some concrete. And most of that would be done within the walls, but occasionally, if this makes any sense, there's a post. And the post occurs generally where there's a large bank of windows, which is in each of what was the classrooms. And so we think that that's somewhat of a disadvantage, just because within looking at these windows you would see 1 and sometimes 2 posts. The third scheme, which I don't illustrate, is that some of the walls in some locations would be removed and reconstructed as wood frame walls. So kind of removing the hazard, but rebuilding the wall. We probably looked at close to 5 schemes for the structural. A lot of them came into the building either with posts or concrete or something. And so these were the 3 that we felt were the most reasonable. We also looked at implementing sustainability measures with the goal of achieving LEED certification. And so these would all be incorporated into the design. Starting with rehabilitation of an existing building. We meet some of the LEED points just by proximity to downtown. And then we would look at stormwater design, water efficiency, mechanical and electrical systems, and construction waste management, and then the indoor environmental qualities. So we also developed cost estimates for each of the schemes. Scheme 1, which is the largest, is at $7,003,387. That was scheme 2 and 3 are fairly similar. And just to let you know that these are based on the work that was done both architecturally and then all of the systems work. We have a very healthy design contingency, or a contingency, design and construction, and it also includes all the soft costs that could be anticipated at this point, including move in, move out, LEED certification, escalation to from now until the time of construction, and so it's an all-in number. The other thing, I realize that this is not very legible, and we can issue this after the meeting, but what I wanted to show you is that each alternative has a different number for different categories. So for instance, scheme 1, the structural was, almost 100,000 less than scheme 3. That is a potential scheme for whatever option you choose. And so as we look at these numbers, I just want to make sure everybody understands that we can pick some of the more cost-effective options from one scheme and apply them to another. But we've kind of allocated them across the different schemes, if that makes sense. And then also, I wanted to point out that we do have a subtotal for the actual trade costs of structure, construction, new construction, building envelope, interiors, utilities, and systems, and site work. That has a subtotal that we add all of the contingencies, overhead and profit, and also the soft costs to arrive at the total price. And so that is kind of a summary of what we've been doing and what our recommendations are. And I know that there's going to be some discussions about next steps, and happy to answer any questions.
What I'd like to do is have the council, while we have the benefit of Naomi and her team here, answer any questions you have. We do have a council ad hoc committee, and part of the next step discussions would be working with them to discuss some of the feedback. As you know, we are evaluating some pre-mitigation FEMA applications to see if there's a possibility for a portion of some grant funding. A lot of that would relate to the EOC, or Emergency Operations Center, potential, and also the fact that this is a seat of government, and in the event of a disaster, we need to be operational, and frankly, we are probably in the unsafest building at this point in time left in town. And we do have some issues that we are barely compliant with California state law encouraging the seismic retrofit of buildings. And I do use the term barely because I don't want to say we're not compliant. But in the last 20 years, the council, the position of the town has been to take the lowest level requirement, whereas some of our neighboring communities have imposed new ordinances requiring design, retrofit, et cetera. The town has simply said those buildings that are unreinforced need to let people know that. And then they can make their own decision as to whether to enter the building, and if it rumbles, how to get out. That I don't think long-term is a good way for us to approach business, and I think that's what led the council to commission this study and the analysis, and a lot of information in a short presentation, but we'll be working with the ad hoc committee and looking at some recommendations. And I do want to point out that the council had asked for some different ideas. And again, part of the framework was respecting the history of this building and the architectural connection to the community. And there are costs associated with choosing to restore and retrofit a very old building. And that's what you're seeing reflected there. And we're not trying to put low numbers in. I'd rather we come in with a realistic budget, and then as we take advantage, this can be phased in a couple different. We can move forward with initial planning and finalize a design step incrementally if that's something the council wants to do while we're finalizing full construction funding. But it's also something that is most likely going to require the use of a debt instrument, because it's not something that the town on its annual budget can afford to do as a one-time allocation. So short thumbnail sketch on a few of the issues that the ad hoc committee will be working on.
Good. Did we look at an alternative of scraping the site clean and building completely new?
I'll answer that one for her. No, because that was not something based on the council's previous decision. The recommendations at that time were to look at retaining the historical character.
I understand that. But we might have to give up some of that historical character. We might be able to retain the bell and the bell tower, but we might have to give that up in the interest of cost savings. So, does council have any questions for the architect or Councilmember Mueller?
You talked about putting some 6-inch wood boards just to reinforce the whole building. What would that cost, just so we could really address safety?
That was $387,000 construction cost in the estimate.
So,
including the foundations and the shear walls and the collectors, everything in the walls, the floors, the roof. So it's not just the walls.
so for $380,000, we could really make this building safe.
you could reinforce, you could take care of the unreinforced masonry.
Okay, thanks.
Councilmember Chilton?
The first alternative that you had up there talked about community services department being within this building, and it felt like, or maybe it wasn't as clear, on the second two that either I didn't see that or you didn't point those out. Because one of my questions, and maybe this is to you, Steve, is I think we're relocating most, if not all, of the community services department heads or department employees over to the new.
For clarification,
Community center.
there's no community services staff in any of these scenarios. and we will
Community
get-
development. It's the building and,
Oh, we're talking about building and planning.
What we
Yes.
refer to as planning and building,
Okay.
our building inspection, our engineering, and file management. Even though we have a few people, some of those are on contracted services, as our speaker earlier mentioned, and we still do have the requirement to provide space. But none of the community services department staff are housed on any of these alternatives, nor is the library.
Okay, it's just terminology. Thank you.
yeah, sorry.
Any more questions? Councilmember Dutton?
Was there a time length to do this attached to each one of the scenarios?
We didn't, no, we didn't attach a time length. They would all be fairly similar, I think, in terms of design and construction.
It seems like hugely disruptive atmosphere is going to be going on.
Let me help clarify in a short words. And the mayor asked me to stay brief and focused, but the answer to your question would be yes. And basically, we would have to vacate the building in order to have this level of work done. And I also need to point out that while we can do the reinforcement, if it will be very expensive. I mean, it's going to trigger electrical, because if you frame in 6 inches, you've got to run new electrical and a whole lot, and you have the fixed costs with move out, move in. So that's why we're breaking some of these in so you can see what the components are, and you're still dealing with the existing space footprint that, the life expectancy of the modular unit that we have, we kind of exceeded that about 10 years ago. And that space still is going to need to be utilized if we don't do something. That doesn't mean it can't be replaced with a new modular, and we can certainly build a new facade around that if that is how we choose to address our space needs. So there's room for further discussion and refinement, although it might have some stability issues as far. One of our goals was how do we get an emergency operations center space, and it doesn't always have to be a wide open space like the council chambers, but we need a space that meets the state standards for use in an emergency. Right now, the only space that we have that has been designated that way is actually the bays in the Yountville Fire Station, which is not a very productive place to put staff in the middle of an emergency. Nor in a flooding situation is it necessarily a very good place to operate, because it's in the immediate footprint, if you will, of areas that flood. But the construction standards and requirements for those types of facilities are at a different nature. And so that's where some of that cost factor has been built in, and that's one of the advantages in all three of the scenarios to the new construction, where we would house the Emergency Operations Center in the new construction, where we could meet those criterion much easier than in some of the retrofit. But I have to admit, it was, I was optimistic that the price might be a little better, but welcome to the proud owner of a historic building.
Vice Mayor, do you have any comments? Or
I have two questions. One, the second story scheme, I'm assuming falls within the 30-foot vertical limit that we have. Okay. And the other one has to do with, it sounds to me like you're not doing anything outside the walls. You're not dealing with how we may be reworking parking or...
We did. And I think just in an attempt to be brief, I didn't go into a lot of the site work. There were two quick issues. One was there was a property line issue that had some questions. I guess the portable extends across the actual property line. So we have established and did a survey and made sure that we understood the limits of your property. And then we are proposing, and it doesn't show up on this plan, but we're proposing a street widening with perpendicular parking along the street to the south.
And part of that displacement process, are we talking about relocating in trailers on site? Or has that been the purview?
On this part of this, remember, you're at a 15% concept plan discussion while we look at where we might want to go. And the short answer, Vice Mayor, is most likely we don't have rental space available in town, so the most plausible will be portables on the front yard at this point. Now, we have some, if that's not acceptable to the council, we can evaluate other alternatives, but it gets very limited to stay within our space. And so, that's just some of the things that we have to further discuss as the council moves this project forward. One of the discussions, obviously, could be if the council chose to take up parking in the community center, but I don't know that that's necessarily going to be a positive. So I would say that from our perspective, the most logical at this point is keeping the seat of government here and putting a couple modular units on the front lawn and then resodding after a year.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone from the public that has any questions or comments for the consultant? Steve? This is your baby.
Steve Rosa, 6468 Washington Street, Space 2. Having been a former employee for many years and on the council, I kind of championed this project, I suppose. We've known for a long time that, in fact, I think 1987, when the original study was done, that the building was unreinforced, that it was unsafe, and the wiring was bad. A lot of the employees have crawled underneath this building in the in the attic and all over the place. We have done some minor upgrades over the years. We put a emergency generator hookup in the building so we would have emergency power, which was almost kind of silly because we knew in an emergency this building, as Steve has said, is not the safest place in the world. Many of you may not know that we didn't have hot water in this building until about 8 years ago. There was no hot water in this building. They had taken the hot water heater out. And the modular building, as our consultant has says, is about 6 or 8 feet, I believe, over the property line and extended into the school property, which they've been very tolerant with over the years. They've known it, and we knew it when that was moved in here. So I really think this is a necessary project. It needs to go forward. There is asbestos under the floorboards from the old heating ducts. There are a lot of bad things. As they pointed out, the wiring is bad, and we've known that for a while. So the project needs to go forward. I think it's a necessary project for this community. And thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Judith Caldwell, 6880 Jefferson Street. I consider Steve Rosa one of the knights of Yountville and watched him closely when I was on the council for 5 years. And I wholeheartedly agree that this is absolutely timely and beyond being due. I have watched the people who work in these offices closely over the years and so appreciate and respect the time, effort, energy, responsibility, expertise, kindness and warmth, efficiency in getting phone calls back and written responses. And I remember discussions on the council of getting a new bathroom in and getting a handicap ramp. And while I was here, the only revision that I can remember being able to vote in were the 5 butterflies and the mural on the back wall. And the cost was practically nothing, but aesthetically it added so much to this room. And because this is your second home, for some of you in a way, your first home, you deserve absolute safety, but you also deserve the aesthetic beauty and comfort that council people enjoy in their own homes. And that's going to take some money. And I think that if anybody deserves to spend it, it should be spent on the people who run this town. As far as the cultural beauty and the architectural, artistic flair, I would say that the second story adds so much because of the balancing pillar. And I'm just so happy that this project is here this evening. You've got my complete support as your commissioner. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Good. Thank you for a good report. Item 9, Yountville Equal Rights Resolution. Before we start with this item this evening, I would like to make a couple of statements. You know, like the Napa City Council and many more to come, I'm sure this council is being asked to address an issue that may or may not be appropriate for discussion on tonight's agenda. I say this because the resolution before us tonight addresses an issue that for many reflects some very personal and philosophical beliefs on a subject that has touched off a great deal of controversy and debate, and has already been decided by a majority vote of the citizens of the state of California. Does that make it right? I don't know, and we're going to discuss that this evening. One of the reasons I was concerned about placing this item on tonight's agenda was because of some of the comments and articles, letters, and blogs that I read that were less than flattering of some of the members with the Napa City Council. And while I may not agree with how Napa handled the matter, I do understand that it is a very difficult subject to discuss for some, and tonight you'll receive the same level of respect and consideration you extend to me and the rest of the council. And with that, I just want to let everyone know that this meeting will be conducted in an orderly and civilized fashion. I don't expect applause. I don't expect outbursts from the audience. We'll discuss it, and your opinion is very important to us. We will listen to each and every one of you. However, I do intend to put a time limit on each presentation of 3 minutes. And after tonight's hearing, if for any reason you have any questions or concerns, I welcome a positive and healthy discussion. With that, I will turn it over to Vice Mayor Dunbar.
Thank you, Mayor. And in the place of a typical staff report, I've prepared an opening statement that will kind of explain why I have presented this resolution to the Town Council. And as the Mayor just stated, as many of you may know, last month a resolution related to Proposition 8 and the marriage equality debate was brought before the Napa City Council. Many members of the Napa Valley community and beyond responded to that action. Subsequently, I was asked by a few Yountville residents to bring the issue to the Yountville Town Council for discussion. Acknowledging and respecting the fact that members of our community are personally impacted by this issue, that's what I'm doing tonight with this resolution. Having been following the public discourse since California voters passed Proposition 8 last November, it does not surprise me that such a statewide social issue has come before us. While we are a small community, we're also a diverse community. Our fabric is made up of an array of age, race, religion, sexual orientation, and social and economic status. We have the unique pleasure to include the residents of the California Veterans Home as part of our community. Our distinct town character does not insulate us, however, from many of the same concerns or challenges that exist throughout the state and the nation. We consider Yountville a world-class international destination, truly the heart of the Napa Valley. With all that comes a responsibility to serve all facets of our community, residents and visitors alike. As the Town Council, we should not and do not discriminate, nor should we stand by silently in the face of discrimination or a denial of equal rights toward any of our residents, our businesses, or our visitors. This resolution is not limited to any one single issue or segment of our population. It's about community values. It's about restating this town's commitment to equality for everyone. Our state senator, Pat Wiggins, noted that both houses of the California legislature recently passed resolutions opposing the Proposition 8 outcome, noting that the amendment eliminates a fundamental right for one classification of Californians, denying them equal protection under the law. Though not legally binding, I'm asking this council to make a similar statement. Tonight's discussion and potential action does not mean any and all social or political issues are the purview of this council. As I stated, I feel the statewide ongoing debate related to marriage equality made it appropriate for this town to restate its existing policy of acceptance, tolerance, and anti-discrimination. The action I recommend to this council tonight is to discuss and reinforce the town's commitment to equal treatment of all of our residents, our employees, our visitors, and our business community. I request the council consider adopting my resolution as a statement of support for equal rights and protection under the law. Thank you.
Did you want to read your resolution?
I can do that now? Certainly. And it is available as all the other staff reports on the wall if you don't have a copy. And there were some changes, very minor text changes that were given out to the council. I think the ones on the wall were corrected or adjusted. So the resolution reads as follows. First, the recitals. The Town Council has adopted and implemented a long-standing policy that supports equal rights and equal employment opportunities, and which prohibits discrimination on the basis of age, race, gender, religious beliefs, sexual orientation, marital status, national origin, or physical or mental disability. The town embraces the vast diversity of its residents, visitors, and local workforce, and recognizes the value of cultural and social diversity in our community. The town seeks to be a safe, vibrant, and tolerant place for all of its residents and their families, strives to be a community that offers fair and equal opportunity, free from hate and all forms of discrimination, and recognizes and appreciates the significant contributions of all of its residents, visitors, and members of the business community. A majority of Napa County voters rejected Proposition 8 due, at least in part, to the discriminatory impact on same-sex families and its prohibition of same-sex marriage. And the Town Council acknowledges the state of California's position on the legality of same-sex marriage, but opposes the prohibition of same-sex couples from the equal opportunity to marry due to the discriminatory nature of such a prohibition. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Town Council of the Town of Yountville as follows. The Town of Yountville does not support discrimination of any kind. The Town of Yountville does support equal rights and protection for all citizens under state and federal law. This resolution finds that all people, regardless of sexual orientation or other individual condition, should enjoy the same social and legal benefits granted all citizens under the constitutions of the state of California and the United States of America. And this resolution shall take effect immediately upon its adoption.
Thank you. Before I open the public comment, does council have any questions or of the mayor or the vice mayor or myself? All righty. I will open the public comment on this matter. If there's anyone wishing to speak or state your position, please be advised you have 3 minutes.
I'm sorry, if I may. Should I start by reading this?
Yeah.
3
minutes to state your position.
Sorry to interrupt, Mayor. I didn't want to forget to get this email on the public record from resident Renata Halliday, and I don't remember her street address offhand. Mulberry, somewhere. When Thomas Jefferson wrote that all men were created equal, he addressed the notion of the divine right of kings. With a stroke of his pen, he designated that divinity become the purview of the church and that the church and state separate. In promoting the practice of civil equality that leaves in promoting the practice of civil equality, the council leaves the sanctity of marriage to the church and addresses the right of two consenting adults to enter into a contract that is recognized by society. Although the council is not elected to set social standards, it does have the right and the obligation to address matters of fairness under the law. As a small community, we can set an example. This is one issue I am proud to support. Renata Halliday.
Thank you. Anyone from the public? Yes, ma'am. State your name for the record, please.
I'll be happy to. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Town Council members. My name is Marita Dorenbecker, and I live at, 1870 Oak Circle in Yountville. And I am here to express my support for the adoption of Resolution number 2774-09, approving Yountville Equal Rights Statement. I've been married to John Dorenbecker for 32 years this year. Marriage is the truest expression of commitment that two people can make to one another. The right to marry the person you love should be regarded as a civil right for everyone. And lately in Iowa and Vermont, marriage between same-sex partners has been approved. Now, I believe that California made a mistake in approving Proposition 8 in the last election. But I'm proud to say that the majority of voters in the Napa Valley, and I believe even in our town of Yountville, did not support it, and now it's before the California Supreme Court. Personally, I hope that the Supreme Court upholds our state constitution and recognizes that this is the first time that the Constitution has been amended to take away rights from its citizens, in my lifetime anyway. I want to thank and commend Mayor John Dunbar. I almost said Vice President.
No, thank you.
For bringing this equal rights statement before you. As someone who grew up during the civil rights struggles of the 60s, I know that it takes courage to stand up and do the right thing. At that time, marriage between two people of different races was illegal. This is not a liberal nor a conservative idea. It's a civil right and a democratic ideal. Our culture is maturing, and different models of nuclear families are more and more common. None of those different models threaten the wonderful marriage I share with John and our daughter Kate. The country is moving further toward respecting the rights of all the citizens, and I will be very proud of Yountville if we lead the way. In this country, we have the separation of church and state, which was called for by the Founding Fathers. Thank you, Thomas Jefferson. The Pilgrims and the Quakers who settled in Pennsylvania, where I was born, were escaping the tyranny of the Church of England. In the Declaration of Independence, the Founding Fathers wrote, and I believe that all men and women, I am adding, are created equal and entitled to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Please honor their courage and support the Yountville Equal Rights Statement. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, I'm Carolyn Defer, 1980 Adams Street.
I'm Denny Defer at 1980 Adams Street. Hi, I'm Davis Defer at 1980 Adams Street.
We're just here to express our support of this resolution. We're very proud of Yountville for putting it forward. I want my children to grow up in a community, in a country where everyone's has the same rights, no matter who or what they are, right? My son came home from 6th grade last on the bus from Redwood and said, we talk politics in our home. I've never told them how I voted, because I want them to make their own decision. We discuss all sides. He came home and said, Mom, how are you voting on Prop 8? You better be voting no. I said, wait a minute, I'm not sure which way was what yes meant and what no meant at that time. And we've had lots of talks, and I'm very proud of him for coming home and having the same opinion, that everyone has equal rights in this country, and we don't like to see our friends or anyone else denied that right. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Carolyn Woodson, 2004 Humboldt Street. I have been a resident of Yountville for 21 years, and I hate to best you on this, but I've been married to my husband for 43 years. I think they're going to put us in the Smithsonian. I want to thank Councilman Dunbar also. I appreciate so much your coming forward with this resolution. I wholeheartedly support it, not only as a citizen of Yountville, but as a citizen of the United States of America, because I think that what is stated here is what this country is all about. I have a real appreciation for the same-sex couples that I know who live here. In fact, I officiated at the marriage of one of them just a few months ago, and I certainly endorse this, every word of this resolution, not only as a member of the community, but also as an ordained Christian minister, ordained by a mainline Protestant denomination, the United Church of Christ. I point that out because if you listen to the media, you get the impression that all Christian ministers and all Christian churches are of a more narrow point of view. The United Church of Christ is a very progressive denomination. They were the first denomination ever to ordain a woman, and that happened back in the 1800s. And they are ordaining gay and lesbian ministers all the time. So I appreciate this very much, and I will certainly be proud of this community for supporting it.
Thank you for your comments.
Hello, my name is Jeff Durham, and I own a home at 6633 Yon Street with Joe Wallace, who I've been together with for 10 years now. I was born and raised in Napa, and I've been fortunate to call Yountville my home for the past 5.5 years. I have a business that I run out of my home, as well as a second business just right up the road on Highway 29 here. I dine out in town, I shop here, I interact with my neighbors, I participate with Focus and Yountville Elementary School through donations and activities, as well as working with the Chamber of Commerce and volunteering here. I believe this equality resolution is important and timely. When a similar resolution was brought before the Napa City Council, Councilmember James Kreider stated that this issue should be brought to Washington or Sacramento, not to the town. It simply is not true. This issue needs to be discussed on every level, especially at the town level, where we all interact with each other daily. I believe it is important for all cities and towns to be discussing this issue. How else are we going to grow, develop, and learn? As a citizen of Yountville, I feel this resolution should be passed to reaffirm the town's stand for equality. And I want to thank the Vice Mayor John Dunbar for presenting this resolution, as well as the mayor and the council members for considering it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else?
Hello to all. My name is Josie Jenkins. I have lived in various locations in the Napa Valley over the past 35 years, but currently I reside in the city of Napa. I am representing the Napa Valley Equality Coalition. The coalition came together after this similar resolution was taken up by the Napa City Council. And after that, news of the City Council's actions were widely reported, causing many people who support equality to cancel plans to enjoy the beauty and hospitality of our valley. Those of us who came together to form the Equality Coalition recognized the harm that could come to our business communities if a boycott took hold. Many of us are business owners who will depend on the visitors to our valley, and we are concerned about those who work for businesses also dependent on the tourism industry. NVEC seeks to represent the true spirit of Napa Valley as a place that supports equality for all people, including marriage equality for same-sex people. And we believe that Napa Valley seeks to be a safe and tolerant place for all citizens and their families, and it strives to be a community that offers equal opportunity, free from hate and all forms of discrimination, and that it recognizes and appreciates the contributions of its LGBT citizens, and that it believes that all people, regardless of gender, should be able to enter into the legal contract of marriage and receive the same social and legal benefits and the responsibilities that are and recognition as conferred by the state of California. In the coming days, hundreds of businesses will support full equality and will be listed on our website, and will join with us in urging our elected leaders to also stand with us. We ask our elected leaders to fearlessly promote our valley as the premier gourmet wine and food destination that it is, and to be welcoming to all groups of people interested in what we have to offer. After the story in the San Francisco Chronicle about the couple who decided not to stay in Napa after hearing about the Napa City Council's failure to even discuss the matter, the paper received 1,585 comments, 600 of them in the first 24 hours. Most of them were negative towards the Napa City Council's actions. It is a fact that Napa Valley draws many of its customers from the Bay Area, where there is a large LGBT community. There is a high appreciation from the LGBT community for the things for which we are famous. But on the internet, there have also been reactions to this story, around the country and from around the world as well. We do not want to see our reputation tarnished locally, nationally, and internationally. And to those who say this is not the business of our city councils or boards, I say, there is importance given to symbolic gestures. When we pledge allegiance to the flag, or we sing the national anthem before a sporting event, we perform many actions that symbolize that which knits the fabric of our society together. Our constitutions and the public policies adopted by our elected leaders are that which knit our fabric together. Passing this resolution validates the truth stated, as someone already has, the Declaration of Independence, that we are a nation which believes that all are created equal and are endowed with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And we have been working towards a complete realization of those words for the past 2 centuries plus. And we have seen groups struggle and fight to earn true equality that our founding fathers wanted us to have. And in the past few days, 2 other states have recognized the rights of same-sex couples to marry. Iowa, in our nation's heartland, and Vermont, now Vermont, one of the original 18 states that formed from the 13 colonies. The equality train is now moving across our country. Yountville can be the first city in Napa County to jump on board. All who values what our nation stands for should be eager to jump on board. The Napa Valley Equality Coalition asks you to pass this resolution. Validate all that one of our greatest symbols, the flag, stands for: equality and justice. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Renee Fannin, 2015 Weber. I am not a long-term resident of Yountville, as you all know. However, I will be a long-term resident of Yountville. Sometime last spring, Lisa and I were forced to make a decision. Living in conservative San Diego County, we enjoyed wine and food with our neighbors, and when the people that knew us in LA said, "Why did you move there? It's so conservative," we laughed and said, "Well, we're a bit conservative. We enjoy it." That was before we had our children. We had purchased a home there, and we're ready to raise our family there. It was a huge slap in our face to realize that same-sex families were not accepted there. We didn't believe that. We had no chips on our shoulder. We were certain everything would be fine, and it wasn't. Last spring, we made a decision to find a place that our family would be okay, that our two little boys could go to school and no one would treat them any differently because they had two moms and not a traditional family. We are not a traditional family, those of you who know us. We are far from it. But we are a loving family. We're a strong family. And because we love our children so much, we uprooted our entire lives. We still own a home in the falling economy in San Diego County. And we looked for a place that we thought would be the best place to spend the next 18 years. And we looked diligently. We checked out everything. And we chose Yountville. We chose Yountville because of the school that sits next door to here. We chose Yountville because of the people that we met and interacted with here. And there has not been a day that has gone by since the day we moved here that we've regretted it. It has been everything that we thought it would be and more. We love this community. And this resolution and the adoption of it would be yet another affirmation that we've done the right thing for our family. Thank you, Vice Mayor, and thank you for entertaining it.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else? Comment on this resolution this evening? Anyone? Okay, seeing that, I'll close public comment and bring it back to council for further discussion and or decision. Councilmember Mueller?
Somebody alluded to how Yountville voted, and just to be specific, Yountville did vote 56% no and 44% yes on Prop 8. I just wanted to make sure that everyone knew that.
Yeah. Any other comments? Any other?
No, not this time, no.
Councilmember Chilton?
I've got a couple of comments to make. And I appreciate a lot of the great comments that were made tonight. I do want to state that I do believe that I do not believe this is an appropriate item for the town of Yountville as a governmental entity to take an official position on. And I say that specifically based on citizen referendums. The right of the people in the Constitution of the state of California to bring referendums forward, to me, not being a native Californian, is a very unique right, and one that at many times has produced great progress and sometimes produces imperfection. I have stated many times in the past when voter-driven referendums have come to the council that I have refrained from voting on those resolutions. Most recently, that included Measure M, which was a Yountville proposition, Measure O, a Yountville proposition, and also the Ag Preserve Proposition P. That's irregardless of my personal opinion on those. I also want to read out of the town council protocols. In section 7.5, I've got them right here. These are the protocols that govern the conduct of the Yountville Town Council, and it does state that the council should not consider any resolution, motion, or matter which does not affect the conduct of the business of the town of Yountville or its corporate powers or duties as a municipal corporation. Nor should the council consider any resolution or motion supporting or disapproving any legislation or action pending in the legislature of the state of California, the Congress of the United States, or before any officer or agency of the state or of the nation, unless such proposed legislation or action, if adopted, will affect the conduct of the municipal business of the town, not, this is my own editorializing, not the people of the town, and duties of the town of Yountville or its officers and employees as such. This, which is an extremely important matter, in my opinion, does not meet that test of an appropriate matter for this town to consider.
Thank you. Councilmember Dutton?
Well, I'm going to be brief in mine, and I certainly appreciate the comments from everybody. But it was stated many times that currently the state Supreme Court is reviewing an appeal to the voting decision on Prop 8, and I feel that this right here, the council meeting, is not the forum to discuss a matter that the court will make a ruling on in the near future. That being said, I did want to just allude to one of the comments I believe that the last speaker, Renee, made for one of the many reasons that you chose Yountville to live in. And I think that you will find, regardless of what happens here this evening, that town of Yountville will not change any. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Vice Mayor?
Well, I think both in my opening statement and my resolution, I've covered my position pretty thoroughly. I would personally like to thank the council for being willing to hear this issue and hear the residents and hear their very personal perspectives on this. It is in some ways it's a sensitive issue. In some ways it's a very basic fundamental issue. I found it easy to say yes when I was approached by some of our residents to bring this forward, because I thought this is an equal rights and a non-discrimination position. It's pretty easy to take that position. I wasn't deterred by whether it was appropriate from a legal perspective, because there's no legal binding element to this. This is a statement that we can make to not only our community here, but to the county, to the state, and beyond. My intent isn't really to make this a global statement, but I do mean for this to be a very personal representation of our leadership in our community. So the fact that we've even been discussing it, I think, is to be commended, to be honest with you, because I do think that it, in some eyes, it can be very challenging to take on an open debate of a social issue. But this is, as I stated here, this is an issue of community values and fundamental equality. So I would certainly look forward to a vote on my resolution in support. Hopefully opposed, so be it.
Good. And I'm very comfortable with the language of this resolution in that it doesn't present, in my opinion, a conflict of interest. It doesn't fly in the face of our protocols, our policy, our procedures. It is not a decision that we're making, a legally binding decision. We're establishing by passing this resolution, we're establishing Yountville as being a socially acceptable community, a diverse community. You know, it's so difficult to wrap all the emotions into a statement. And, you know, I appreciate all the statements made by the citizens of Yountville. It's important. We're here to represent your interests, and we're not taking a legal stance. We're simply making a statement that is reflective of the culture of Yountville. And to me, that's very important. You know, you can talk about the constitutionality of this issue. You can talk about whether or not there are laws in place that affect the constitutionality of this issue and other issues. But there's always going to be something that's going to appeal or pull at the heartstrings of some group of people, individuals that have consistently and overwhelmingly faced some form of discrimination and obstacles that are insurmountable in the past. And I consider this to be one of those obstacles. And I don't know. I know this is going to be ongoing. I know other jurisdictions are going to be facing the very same issue. I hope they will at least discuss it. I hope they will consider adopting a resolution for non-discrimination in their communities, and that should apply to everyone. With that, I would be interested in entertaining a motion.
I will move that we approve resolution number 2774-09, approving the Yountville Equal Rights Resolution Statement.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Chilton?
Abstention.
Councilmember Moeller?
Yes.
Councilmember Dutton?
Abstention.
Vice Mayor Dunbar?
Yes.
Mayor Sosserman?
Yes. Thank you. That motion carries.
If I could just say again, Mayor, thank you to the members of Yountville that came out tonight. And again, I appreciate staff and council support for me bringing this forward. Like I said, it's a difficult topic, but I appreciate their openness to it.
Thank you. Item 10, Digital Infrastructure and Video Competition Act. Do we have a staff report?
I'm only hoping that we'll have such heartfelt testimony in response to the DIFCA ordinance, but I don't think it's going to happen, especially since everyone's
never
leaving.
know.
What? Did you have some comments?
I said I only hope that we have such heartfelt testimony regarding the DIFCA ordinance, but I don't think it's going to happen.
Oh, the digital?
Yeah. Especially since everyone left.
They're still here. There are still people here. They are still here.
And people are watching us live
Yes.
all over the town.
Maybe they'll see it live and want to come in and comment on DIVCA.
Shut the door.
This is the introduction and first reading of an ordinance that essentially just secures the town's rights should Comcast or any other video provider seek a state franchise to provide video service in the town of Yountville. You receive video service through Comcast with a franchise that was issued by the town of Yountville under a franchise agreement that was authorized by ordinances that already exist in the municipal code. Those ordinances are essentially overridden by the state's law that now says that only the state can issue franchises for provision of video service. But those state laws also allow you to retain some control and also to retain your fees that you receive from franchisees who get state permission to operate here. The major points are that under your existing agreement, you receive a 2% franchise fee from Comcast, and the state authorizes up to 5%. Comcast may or may not seek a state franchise. I presume that they will. They haven't yet. They seek that upon the expiration of their agreement, which will happen in October. And so if at that time they do seek a state franchise by adopting this ordinance, you will assure that you get a 5% franchise fee. It also allows you to establish a PEG, or Public Educational and Governmental Access Fee, which your agreement does not provide for now. And that's 1% of their gross revenues here in the town of Yountville. It preserves your authority to ask that they provide PEG channels. That's Channel 28, the channel on which you are able to broadcast this meeting. You also are able to enforce customer service standards, which you're able to do now, although I don't know how often that happens. I've sort of looked through the town's files, and there have been instances of complaints in the past. This makes it clear that you have the authority to enforce those standards and seek penalties when they're violated. And it also restates the permitting and construction process that video franchisees will go through.
Council, have any questions for staff? Councilmember Chilton?
Can we make them show up at the time they say they're going to show up in our customer service standards?
You know what? I don't know if that is in the customer service standards, but I imagine it is. If they say they're going to be there between 9 and 12, then they have to be there between 9 and 12.
I have a serious question.
All right.
Thank you. This only affects what we should call traditional landline cable providers. This does not affect DirecTV or
Right,
Dish
it
or
doesn't.
anything like that. Okay.
Exactly.
And I assume, or maybe with the state franchise, is there any obligation by a company like Comcast to provide land cable access to Yountville?
No.
I mean, if they did not renew and say, you know what, it's a
If they
town,
don't-
they wouldn't
If they don't
have to
seek
do
a
it.
franchise, they don't have to
Now, do
provide
they have to actually
service.
go to the state and ask for a franchise specifically for Yountville, or is it a
Yes,
blanket?
it's by
Okay.
individual jurisdiction.
And
If
just,
I-
I just want to clarify one other
Well,
thing.
I have a clarification
Okay.
on that. If Comcast chooses not to renew their franchise, the town would have the authority to go out and seek other franchise operators.
Okay.
Although Comcast MO in the greater Bay Area has been to buy up every other operator. So that's,
Well, the
but that
infrastructure-
would be the process. And that's actually, if you go back, that's how the old community antennas generally started, with each community having a lot of their own satellite or cable services before they were all merged together.
Well, I have a question related to that. The way I read it, and I spent a long time trying to go over and over this. It was very kind of confusing. Maybe you could simplify it a little bit later. But so I thought these were all turning over to the state because of AB 2987. We can't go out because it says here after October 5th, 2009, if this expires, you can't enter into any contract.
We can't grant a new franchise
Right.
to any
So we
provider.
can't go out
You
if they don't go and get a state franchise, and we are left with nothing, and nobody else from the state comes in, we could be left without anything. So my question is, can we talk to Comcast to see if they would like to extend the contract? I know there are issues with that, but have we talked to them?
There's a couple of things. The short answer on that is the cable industry has supported this. This is what they wanted. DIVCA is what they wanted because they wanted out of negotiating and having compliance and management issues with each entity. So the MO from Comcast has been that when their contracts come up, they will apply the state standard. They don't.
And I totally agree with that, but I'm just
And-
worried about little Yountville here. We're
Well,
like one of those
What I'm
little
gonna say
places
is-
that we
right.
might get
They-
overlooked.
They don't operate that way. And I will also say that there's money to be made, and they don't want to lose market share. And really what this is being is preemptive, because what they're really hoping is that little Yountville is asleep behind the wheel and forgets to update its legislation so that when they come to renew, they can say, you didn't do this, therefore you don't get it. That's what they would really like to see
So this is
happen.
really kind of, that was my next question, but pretty much a housekeeping ordinance
It's a
that we
housekeeping
need to put
and-
in place
and
now to take care
preventative,
of that.
Because they will come to us, and, earlier in my career, I spent a lot of time negotiating cable franchise agreements back when you actually could do something. And that's what they really want to avoid. But we will get a formal notification on the very last day of the window saying this is what they want to do and this is what they're proposing.
I mean, there may be value, and Steve and I have talked about talking to Comcast ahead of that deadline to see where they're going. And once one provider seeks a state franchise, then other providers can also seek a state franchise in that same area. And quite frankly, I honestly don't know the relationship between Comcast and AT&T at this point.
Right.
But because at one time, AT&T owned Comcast, and it was AT&T, and then it became, but I think they are separate now, and so
Right.
AT&T may seek a franchise in Yountville. I know that they have sent preemptive letters in a general way throughout the state of California to say that they may seek to provide service. And so you may have a situation where you have a choice of providers under different state franchises, and you will get 5% from each of them. And it's primarily, the 5% is set by state law, so
Right.
even if you didn't adopt this ordinance, if they were a state franchisee, they'd have to pay you 5%. It's the PEG fee and the access to PEG channels and the customer service penalties and things that you want to preserve by adopting this ordinance.
Yeah, and I understand that. I'm just wondering, is there some value to at least having a conversation with Comcast in case they want to extend it? I mean, we would only get 2%, not 5%, but that 3% is probably going to be passed on to every individual homeowner in Yountville anyway. I mean, does it make sense to at
Well,
least have that conversation before we do this?
It is one of the points that I point out in the staff report, that the franchise fees generally pass through to the customer anyway.
Right, exactly.
So it's not something that is coming off the top. They pass that through,
Sure.
which is the reason that the state legislation allows local agencies to pass an ordinance that sets a lower franchise fee than the 5%. So you would get the 5% whether you pass this ordinance or not. If for some reason there's something, there isn't anything, as far as I can see in DIVCA, that prevents you from negotiating an extension of your existing franchise. You just can't issue a new one.
Right.
One of the issues you have, however, is that the ordinance that was the municipal code section that was passed to allow that franchise agreement says that all franchises will be only for 20 years. And here in
This
Yountville.
is 89.
And
so
so
we're
when it
still-
expires, that could be read to mean that you have to negotiate a new franchise, which of course you can't because of DIVCA. So.
But it could be argued the other way, too.
Right, it could be. So, but of course, Comcast would argue that because there are benefits to Comcast now that it's lobbied for by getting DIVCA passed, that it wants to operate under a state franchise. It's going to say, that's the state law. That's what we get to do. So,
well, I mean,
but there is value, I think, in talking to them ahead of, just so that there's some projection
agree.
about what's going to happen
Okay,
in
good.
October.
I think there's, because we have plenty of time, it's just till October.
Right.
I mean,
The
if
thing
you
here
think-
is, I would say you're correct in asserting that this is a housekeeping, a preventative. We can then send them a letter saying, we're ready to begin the review process in terms of how we want to move forward. And if they're not interested, I really, we aren't going to be not served. I am fairly confident.
Well, if they're not interested, we don't really have any options, so we'll
Well,
just take what the
actually, our
state.
residents do, I mean.
Well,
some
we
would
have
argue
satellite, no, I mean, in terms of
satellite
cable.
providers that serve the area.
We'll have a state
And you have
franchise.
one cable. I actually going to kind of agree with the town attorney, which is Comcast is really not going to be interested in having a separate negotiated agreement here, because once they do that, other entities are going to say, we want that, and this is not the place that they're going to, this is not the location that they're going to come out and try to work something differently. And this is exactly what they're trying to avoid by their support of DIVCA.
But we would be precluded from entering into any other contract. I mean, just a
Well,
possible
again,
extension,
right,
right?
I think there's a possibility for extension, but you could not negotiate a new agreement and a new franchise if, in fact, what a 20-year franchise in Yountville means is 20 years and that's it. So.
Councilmember Chilton?
Just to clarify, because you were referring to the 5% and the 1% for public access, it's up to 5%, right? I mean, we could say 0.
If you, right, the
And-
ordinance as written says 5%.
I understand.
But the
But
council.
But the state law doesn't set it at
Right.
5%, it sets a
Exactly.
maximum. It's like the vehicle emission fee maximum.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Dutton, any questions?
Well, I was just going to hitchhike on that a little. I mean, so that is listed in all negotiations as straight pass-through. In other words, that percentage.
Well, we don't-
So, I mean, if we only took 1%, then the residents would actually get a 4% less.
Right now,
Potentially,
it's
but-
only, right now, the residents are only paying 2%.
Right.
Right.
Or if we left
Well-
it at 2, there wouldn't be an increase in it, so
Right.
to speak with that.
But what I also point out is, this is how you fund the being on Channel 28. So if we want to improve our public access and transparency and all of those good things, this is a vehicle by which all of the parties participate in the process.
And I would just note that the 1% PEG fee can only be used for capital improvements for PEG access. So the 5% doesn't have that restriction.
Vice Mayor, any questions?
My one question about, any restrictions on the funds was just answered. To me, this seems like a very clear improvement to the condition, more revenue, more positive conditions. I don't think there's anything hidden in here.
Good. Anyone from the public have any comments on this ordinance this evening? We're introducing this ordinance tonight.
I'm sorry, Donna Hine, Gateway. I just have a question. How does this pertain to the manufactured home parks? Or does it in any way? Because in our park, Comcast is included in our service. But for those people like myself who do not have Comcast, I'm still paying that fee. And I don't like it. To say that's a masterpiece of understatement. And especially since I don't know how much of my fee, my monthly rental fee, does go to Comcast. Plus, I also, anybody who has sat in my kitchen can look out my window and see old Comcast lines that have never been removed, and new ones have come in. So when I'm looking out and seeing 6 lines, which I don't know technically what they're called, but they sway back and forth and they run into trees, and nobody is willing to take any responsibility for taking them down. But more importantly, how does this affect? And I understand that because there is an agreement with the Yountville Inn that includes the park, I have no choice. And I want a choice.
I'll clarify. You are what is called a consumer bulk purchase agreement, where the hotel, a property owner, a homeowners association goes and does their negotiations directly, and that is not subject to purview of this particular ordinance. So
I just resent being called a bulk. So
but that's,
you've answered my question.
The short answer is
I'm just a bulk around here.
And because that's the situation, nor does it affect the veterans' home, which they can enter into, again, what's termed bulk, meaning you're bringing a large number of consumers, and they negotiate a direct price for that service delivery. And that's commonly used on apartments, some homeowners associations, retirement homes, and mobile home parks.
I guess we have another issue to stand up for, Bill. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Anyone else? All righty. Seeing no public comment, bring it back to council for further discussion or decision.
I have some comments.
I have a comment too. Just a minor one for Amy. I kind of noticed in here that you've got city when you're referring to Yountville instead of town. I understand they're equivalent, but I don't really say change city to town, but I'm just bringing it up. So understanding this is housekeeping, if we approve this, I also understand you'll probably at least call Comcast and just have that conversation. And I guess my only comment is, I know it's nice to have money in our coffers, but I don't really want to raise the rates of Comcast fees, and I don't even have Comcast, so, but I'm still a little confused that I understand that the 5% would come to the town, but then Comcast would just likely pass that on to the provider. So if we change this to 2, I mean, how would we really know if they were going to pass that on or not? I mean, that's the part.
Here's the general
my
answer.
My general statement is I don't want
to. They're going to pass it on at 5%, and we're not going to take the benefit. That's what's more than likely to happen. And so the concern I would also say is the council continues to want ZDRB meetings, Park and Community Services Commission televised, and this is the funding vehicle by which we're paying for that. So it's something you need to be thinking about in terms of all of that, because this is helping to pay for a lot of the improved accessibility that the community values and has told you that they want.
I know, but I just don't want to raise rates any more than I can. So, I mean, I would just be willing to absorb, to change this to 2, and that would be my modification.
Councilmember Tilton?
A couple of my comments are going to follow on Councilmember Waller's. I think we should spell this out like it is. This is a TAX, a tax. And my problem with this is you have to think about the converse of what is about to transpire. I actually didn't have Comcast until I was on the council, and then I got Comcast so I can have a DVR so I can record council meetings and go back and see what happened. Now I don't have to. Sorry, Comcast, but we now stream online so I can go back and look at the archive. I know Ms. Hine, she doesn't come to all the council meetings just because it's so thrilling to be in this earthquake danger building, but she has DirecTV. She doesn't have Comcast. And I think what's ironic is we are about to, most likely, I shouldn't say most likely, I think it should be 2%. And the reason is we are going to make the one avenue for getting public access television more expensive. And my answer to Comcast is if you're going to put a 5% surcharge on the bottom and say it's a governmental fee, that to me is no different than somebody putting a line on a tax on your bill and saying there's a 15% tax when really there's an 8.25% tax. And then if they want to raise their rates for that extra 3%, Comcast customers can send them a letter and say, why are you charging $50 in Napa, but you're charging us $53 in Yountville? And they can say, well, because your council passed up taxing you more. So I understand this is theoretically housekeeping, but I think ironically we want to provide public access. We want to have all the channels that we can have in terms of meeting the public, but in the middle of a recession, we're theoretically about to add 4% to everybody's Comcast bill. So I don't think we should do that. I think we should leave it at 2%. And we'd probably be very rare in the state of California, and maybe we could send a letter to Comcast if they play some monkey business with the bill.
So are you proposing 2% for the franchise fee and no PEG fee?
That's correct.
Mm-hmm. Councilmember Dutton?
Well, I can see the 2%. I mean, I would in fact like to leave it at that if we could. Without the PEG fee, so we're just telling them we're not going to have any capital improvements in.
I hear you guys, but you're really setting a very bad precedent, and especially when you're talking about a revenue stream and what you want to do, because anything we don't generate here in that pass-through is not necessarily guaranteed to be passed back to your resident consumer. And it's your choice, but you're not, when you adopt this, you don't get to come back and change this again. That's one of the state entitlements is you can't come back and go 3 years from now, we want to go back to 5%. So you need to think about that in that structure. And this is the process and the rules that are going to be employed statewide for the regulation of cable TV. And it's your choice, but I'm telling you that you are looking from a fiscal and a long-term standpoint that, we've talked about, we've spent $25,000 this year in additional expense to televise ZDRB meetings. You've told me you want the Parks and Community Services Commission. We're spending money to make sure that all of these things get done. I'm concerned. I just have to put that in front of you when you weigh that consideration is what other vehicle do we have?
And I would only point out that if your interest is in preserving it at its current percentage, that would be the purpose of this ordinance. Because if you don't set the ordinance now before it expires at a rate lower than 5%, it will be 5%. And then they will do whatever they will do regarding collection of that from the customer. So it's that percentage less than 5 and the PEG fee that if you want to address it by ordinance that you would need to do before the expiration of the town's agreement.
Well, I mean, back to Steve's comment, I mean, I think I disagree because what this says is that the state is going to give us 5%. And what we're some of us are trying to say is, we will take that 5%, but we don't want that to just be passed on to our citizens.
The state is not going to give you 5%. The state franchise, when it's issued, will say that the franchisee has to pay the town 5%. It's going to get that 5% from the customer. I mean, that's just the way it works.
It has worked historically?
This percentage is not on top of what the state requires. It's just that the state requires 5%, but you can accept less than 5 from Comcast if you choose to by setting something less than 5% in this ordinance.
So there's no way that we can prevent passing this extra tax, thank you, Councilmember Chilton, on to the customer.
Not the way the structure is.
I mean, unless for some reason Comcast chooses not to pass it on to the customer.
Well, that was my original comment about having a conversation with them, because if we could extend what we have currently at 2%.
Well, you could do that by this ordinance if you adopt the franchise fee at 2% by this ordinance. And that will override the state's imposition of 5%. But you can only do that by this ordinance. You know, again, unless Comcast agrees to extend the agreement, which again, there are terms in the agreement that are more onerous to Comcast than the state franchise that are apart from the franchise fee.
Sorry, I'm just confused. I'm trying to get a benefit for our citizens. I don't understand what you said, so I apologize. Maybe Louis understands it, but I don't.
Well, if you want, if your intention is that the franchise fee, which is going to be either way paid by the customer, be less than the state's required 5%, you want to set that in this ordinance. And you have the opportunity to do that now before the franchise expires.
So if we're talking dollars, you're saying right now we're getting 17, 18, we're going to get 51 to 54. So we're talking a difference of roughly $34,000. So that's what you're saying. You're saying you guys are willing to give up $34,000.
That's the question. You're actually closer right now to $26,000.
Or what we're saying, the residents are going to be charged $34,000 less, and we're going to have to dig up $34,000 somehow to pay for all of the little goodies.
Yeah, and just like I say, I'm not advocating. It's an important thing to realize that in our community, there are certain funding structures that exist. This happens to be one of them, and that's the franchise fee is paid for the right to use the public right-of-way in the space and the maintenance costs associated with it, and then to also provide for the public access and the component like that. Yountville has not chosen to be very proactive on its franchise fee structure, as it hasn't in a lot of funding structures. You know, the challenge that I'm trying to share with you all is if you want us to improve programming services and at the same time not deal, we don't have a lot of miscellaneous fees and charges in this town. That's all I'm just saying. This is a tool. And if you choose to do something lesser, there are consequences to that decision. And it may mean saying no to some of the things that you've talked about wanting to put forward in the budgets going forward. And that's your decision.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you. I do not see reducing the percentage that Comcast has to pay by the state ordinance, reducing the number from the maximum that we're allowed makes any sense at all. It's reducing the revenue stream that we would be getting, that they would be obligated to give us to support the services that we have been saying for months or years to the town manager and staff that we want to improve, that we want live, we want broadcast that people that can't make it to the council chambers to see us. We want to have a public access channel to get more information around the entire community. It makes no sense to me that we would want to restrict the money that Comcast would have to pay for those services, because then it would just be coming out of, if you want to call it a tax, it comes out of the other tax revenue that we collect in town. It's going to come out of the general fund, or it's going to come out of some other part of the budget, or we're going to lose that service. It doesn't even make sense to me that we would consider reducing it below the 5%. And I realize I think the community understands services cost money. I think they would understand that a rate increase to get more service and better service makes sense. And I don't think that the dollar amount necessarily matters here. It just seems, I'm surprised that there's even a hesitation. This is what we've been asking of the staff to present to us, is these opportunities to communicate. And now we're talking about reducing the funding source of that communication. Doesn't make sense to me.
Can I follow up?
Sure.
When we talk about public access, we talk about putting ZDRB. I don't remember going to the community and saying, by the way, down the road, we're going to recover these revenues or these expenses. We said we're doing this because it's a responsible thing for our government to be as open as possible and to get people informed about our government. So then to say, well, we can't have these now because we have a tax source that we're going to pass up. Again, we're talking about passing it up. Who's paying for it? Comcast is not going to pay for it. The citizens of this town who have Comcast are not going to pay for it. And again, we want to reach them through Comcast. Ironically, we're going to make it harder for them to do it because we're going to raise the price of that. That's my logic. Just saying, hey, there's money out there to be gotten. The money is coming from the citizens of the town. It's not going to come from Comcast corporate. That's my perspective on that.
To me, the people that are using the service would be paying the rate, they're paying the fee. The way you're proposing it, everyone in the community would be paying the fee whether they get Comcast or not, which doesn't make sense to me. Because then you're taxing everyone in the community for paying what Comcast isn't paying us.
And my response to that is everybody in this community is paying for streaming video. And if you've got internet access or not, it's coming out of our tax revenues. I think 2%, again, almost a peculiarity of law to me that a local jurisdiction gets to add a tax to your cable bill. We don't add a lot of taxes to a lot of other services provided. So I go back to, I understand your position on that. I go back to the fact that we're going to tell Comcast users in this town, we've done these things, and now we're going to go ahead and raise a 4% surcharge on those of you who use Comcast. And I have DirecTV, so I'm pretty happy about that.
I'm going to make a motion, Mayor, if I may, that we adopt ordinance 377.
You're just introducing it and waiving.
I'm introducing ordinance number 377-09. So we're not even voting on this ordinance. We're just introducing
it and waiving the first reading of it. It will be brought back for second reading and adoption.
I will continue to introduce number 377-09, an ordinance of the Town Council of the Town of Yountville amending Title V Business Taxes, Licenses, and Regulations of the Town of Yountville Municipal Code to add Chapter 5.16 regarding state video franchises operating within the town and waive the reading.
Can I ask for a point of clarification on procedure? On a motion, you can usually do a substitute motion. Can I do a substitute motion on an ordinance?
You have to
well,
wait to see if there's going to be a second on the motion.
Okay.
Right, and yeah, that's what I would wait for.
All right. Thank you.
I'll second that motion.
Can I make a substitute motion to approve ordinance number 377-09, an ordinance blah, 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 with an ordinance of the Town of Yountville amending Title V, Business Taxes, Licenses, and Regulations of the Town of Yountville Municipal Code to add Chapter 5.16 regarding state video franchise operating agreement within the town, as stated, except for a PEG rate of 0% and a franchise tax fee of 2%.
I second.
And that's an introduction.
Yes.
That would be an introduction of the amended ordinance.
Yes.
Can I have a roll call vote, please?
If I may have a clarification first, there's the potential to introduce two ordinances, I presume.
Yes.
Both that have been nominated and seconded.
Yeah.
Well, would ask for a vote on the substitute motion first, and if that motion doesn't carry, then there is already the introduced and seconded motion then that you can reintroduce and vote on.
So if the substitute motion is passed, then we just ignore the first motion?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Have a roll call vote on the substituted motion?
Vice Mayor Dunbar,
No.
Mayor Sosserman,
No.
Councilmember Chilton,
Yes.
Councilmember Moeller,
Yes.
Councilmember Dutton.
Yes.
Motion passes 3-2.
So when we bring, so it's clear, what we will bring back for a second reading is this ordinance amended to eliminate Section 5.1620B, which is the PEG fee of 1%, and a revised 5.1620A to reduce the franchise fee to 2%. Is that correct?
Correct.
And you'll fix the typos.
And the town of Yountville items. Thank you.
I think we can get through this in a very short while, so let's continue. Report from Ad Hoc Committee on Town Legal Services, meeting with representatives from the City of St. Helena. Can we have staff report briefly, please?
I'm just going to recuse myself.
Thank you.
Briefly, the ad hoc committee met with Vice Mayor not being able to attend and participate, with representative from Councilmember Sharon Kroll, retiring City Manager Bert Johansson, and interim City Manager Karen Scalabrini, the mayor and myself, to discuss a range of potential partnership or involvement with the City of St. Helena related to where we stand as individual organizations with recruitment for city/town attorney legal services. The premise tonight is to find out what level of interest and at what juncture might this council have an interest in moving forward with some type of joint partnership with the City of St. Helena, if the council has such an interest. And we outlined 4 potential ranges. One is each town city completes its own RFP development, marketing, advertising, and selection process, and paying for those costs individually. The second is a jointly developed request for proposal, shared marketing and advertising, with each town or city's respective council making their own selection. A joint process where the 2 agencies would join together in a yet-to-be-determined shared partnership to select an individual or a firm to provide legal services. And the fourth one is where a joint process where the 2 agencies join together to hire as an employee an individual that would function as the respective legal counsel, but as an employee of the agency as opposed to a contracted individual or firm. Factors that were looked at included shared marketing and advertising costs. RFP development seemed to be pretty straightforward. That was easy to understand and potentially tie out. There was some discussion on the potential cost savings of a shared employee, whereas that looked like it could add some additional value. Concerns were on how do 2 councils develop the working relationship criteria to manage that position, because each of the 2 councils has 2 direct hires and reports, and they are the town manager or city manager, and then the town attorney, city attorney, respectively. And then there was some concern expressed about split loyalties when serving 2 bosses, and how is that reconciled and dealt with, and what to do if the workload is greater than anticipated. Moreover, it was also the consensus that if there was to be interest on the part of the 2 councils about going forward with one of the shared approaches greater than the shared marketing and selection, that we would recommend a joint meeting of the 2 councils so that all of the council members could benefit from the discussion as to where the council members from each respective community stood on that particular area. With that, I've outlined some of that, and really what we're looking for is feedback from the council. I do want to point out a couple considerations for you. I did mention retiring city manager in St. Helena, and their finance director is their interim city manager, and we have 2 department head recruitments and vacancies going on at this point in time. And the reason I'm bringing this to your attention is how we want to manage the workload and the priorities of what you want us to work on will greatly have some impact in your decisions on how you might want to do this. But whatever you choose to do, we will be most happy to work with you to achieve that outcome.
Does council have any questions for staff? Any thoughts?
I have a question first. Steve, could you, and maybe there's a thought in here too, but explain to us what kind of paperwork you have to kind of go to if you're putting out a request for a proposal for an employee versus if we're doing a contract person, because my thought in here is I'd like to just cast a wide net and really see if who we get out there. Does St. Helena like them? Do we like them? What do they want? Do they want to be a part-time employee here or a full-time employee shared or a contract person? So if I can understand what you're talking about in terms of this extra work, I mean, if we write up something that is going to be an employee versus somebody who's going to be a contractor, explain to me the process, why that requires so much extra work.
You're recruiting for 2 very different animals. And I think what I would say is we can write anything up, send it out there and see what the response is. But people that are looking to be employed want to know what the general operating structure, the reporting relationships, salary benefits, things like that. And then we would have to, one of the key things that a person there would be looking at is how is that relationship going to be managed? Now, I would suffice to say that that's a little bit hard to write into the job description recruitment. So for me, I think one of the more fundamental things is if we want to keep as many options open, that's a challenging one to write, because if you're an employee, you have certain personal expectations that you'll be looking for that could be different than you might have if you're an individual on a contract or a firm on a contract basis. They're just 2 different animals. And
well, I mean, I think I would agree with that for maybe a more medium-level employee, but I think we're talking about an attorney here, and they can usually get pretty creative. I mean, they might say, I don't really care what they're offering or what they're setting up. I want this job, and I'm going to try to get this out of them. So I'm just kind of open.
Councilmember Tilton? Any questions, comments?
My comment is, first of all, I commend staff and who else is on the ad hoc committee? You are. Oh, you are, right? And the vice mayor. I think it's really positive to go out and look for some unique structures. We've talked about it before. We're a small town. We have to do some, whether to call it outsourcing or using contractors. I think that's very beneficial in many ways. And Carla, who's no longer here, brings up benefits and retirement obligations, another reason to look at these kind of structures. You didn't quite say it, Steve, but I don't think that a shared employee makes a lot of sense. I mean, if we could, we'd have to, in my opinion, we'd have to set up a separate agency almost so they could have some sort of clear lines. I do think that a shared services agreement with whether it's an individual lawyer, a law firm, to go together and say, these are the 2 cities, here are the situations you would find yourself in terms of conflicts of interest. Would you like to jointly bid on that? I'm very positive towards that, and I'm glad to see some of the council members up in St. Helena take, I think, what is a proactive and progressive stance on this, and encourage them to work together. I think is always beneficial. So I would look at that. My biggest concern is do you have an RFP that simply says we want to share services with St. Helena? And if we don't find what we like, then we kind of have to start over and look for a direct.
And I think that's
my concern.
Well, part of my concern also is I have worked with the council, and you've all seen a initial working draft of the RFP that certainly I can build off of. But again, part of the element is people are, whether you're an individual looking for a part-time assignment, you're the firm or an individual, the part of the RFP process is to explain enough of our expectations that the person knows what it is that they're proposing to respond to. And that's the challenge of keeping, I think, the employee, direct employee option as opposed to the shared services. The shared service one's pretty easy, and I think you could keep an exit strategy that says it could be that the towns jointly or city-town jointly provide this or go their individual way. I mean, with some clever work, I think I can spend some time writing, but you have to put all of that in going up front. And that's for me, what's more important is we've got a lot of things on our hopper right now. We've got a lot of, and if the council isn't interested in all of this, that's an okay decision. I just need to know what it is, because in this particular case, it is going to all fall in this particular case to me. And there's, that's just a constraint that I'm worried about in terms of meeting all of your other service expectation deliveries.
Well, and my only comment on that is, again, I think the shared services, I really think that the employee setup would be very complicated. A shared service would make more sense to me. And again, if we're going out for an RFP, we're a pretty small fish in the legal pond, so to be able to expand the amount of fees that you get by, I think, more than 50% reading the newspapers. So I think that would be beneficial to get a better quality response for our legal representation and a larger pool to choose from.
Councilmember Dutton?
No, I agree fully in the comments I've heard previously. I think there is a little strength in numbers, so to speak. That being said, there can also be some concern in numbers, and I look, if the whole situation came together, I just look when you have two councils, you got a lot of working parts. You got 10 different people. You got some. Are they all going to be happy this way? Oh, well, he's leaving in 6 months, so who cares? They're going to have a new one. So I do think there's a lot of dynamics that go on there, but I do think if the spirit is there and that both parties are willing to work together, I think it could be a win-win situation for all of them. But there's certainly a lot of considerations, I think, to take into account before you pull the trigger on something like this.
Are you referring to the shared employee or?
Well, either one. I mean, I think it could work. I think a lot of it, though, has to do with, how's the employee going to look at it, and then how are the two councils going to approach it, too. So I think, you have a lot of working dynamics when you do that. Not to say it can't be done, because I think if everybody's looking, hey, this is a very efficient manner, in a sense, you almost have it right now the way Amy was before. Let's face it. She worked for both, councils and what have you. So you do have some experience along those lines as far as when you're talking about hours, responsibilities. And I think there's a lot more detail that have to go into some of these expenses, what it's going to cost, too. Obviously, from the presentation we saw earlier, we don't have any space here for another person to set up shop, so where that would happen, what have you. But those are down the road a little bit, so I'd certainly attack it.
Thank you. Vice Mayor?
I would definitely support the second bullet point about the options of moving forward, doing a joint effort in marketing and advertising. I think that's definitely the best use of the existing staff time and does allow us to potentially broaden the scope of that outreach. I would just mention, I'm not necessarily advocating that we take on the employee, but my initial response when I heard that staff's recommending that as an option for consideration is, well, that's got to be more expensive to add the benefits and add everything else. And when you actually look at that alternative, it's a cost savings. And so I just don't want the council to completely ignore that option down the road, just something to be considered. It makes me nervous advertising a joint jurisdiction position, as many people as that might attract, I'm guessing that it might also, as Councilmember Dutton said, scare them off about doubling the representation. And it has worked so far, I think, and I think it is important that both councils get together and mutually agree that they will respect the other's jurisdiction. And
I also think you have to go a step farther. If you're going to go with a joint managed process, you guys need to lay out the rules and the process. Because right now, even though the person has worked for both entities, the person responsible for making all the management decisions has been the firm, and now individually. And if somebody's unhappy or questioning things, there's a structure. If we go to an employee situation, the council really needs to work out, and we need to have some understanding of how that's going to be managed to include that in the, recruitment structure, because people are going to want to know how are they evaluated, what's the process, determining that it's 15 hours in Yountville, 25 hours in St. Helena, you got planning retreats and occasional special meetings. That part really doesn't, to me, that's not the harder part. The harder part is how do you incorporate what your expectations are, and different councils may have different philosophies towards things and what their issues and things like that. And that's what we kind of need to have an understanding for how each of you are going to reflect that when it is your employee, because unlike some of our other shared services, or where we're talking about potentially a shared service in the community services, some of those are management decisions and structure and operating protocol, but they aren't direct reports of the council.
Well, one last point I'd like to make is when we were deciding what direction to take on an interim basis, I think the council was in consensus that local knowledge was critical, that we wanted representation that understood our issues. And I worry about soliciting and then sharing counsel that then has to have potentially a broader case knowledge that might dilute the quality of the product, frankly. That if St. Helena's issues are different, and certainly in many ways they are, to Yountville's issues, to find somebody that's versed in all of that may be challenging. So.
And I agree. Initially, that was one of my initially that was one of my concerns. I do agree with the second bullet point as well. I also agree with a joint process where the two agencies join together to get, to either solicit an individual or a firm to represent the two agencies. I don't have a problem with that. We all have similar interests. The RFP outlines basic minimum criteria and what the expectations are. That comes from both councils. We've both been working together on that RFP process. I see some issues with sharing an employee. Would that cost savings be in the best interests of Yountville? Maybe it would be in the best interests of St. Helena. And would that shared employee create more leverage in the market in terms of the ability for that individual to dictate their terms as far as employment with the two agencies? I just see it as creating more difficult situations between the two organizations and the individual or the firm that would ultimately be employed by the two agencies. It would just be difficult to manage, in my opinion. But, I mean, if the council thinks that it's something that we should entertain, I'm certainly willing to look at it, but it's certainly not something that we're going to be able to do overnight, and we would have to have meetings with the St. Helena Council and get a consensus. But I just don't see the benefit to sharing an employee. I do see the benefit to soliciting and going out and marketing and doing a joint RFP. I just can't see the benefit in sharing an employee and creating another paid position in the town.
Well, and just you guys have spent a lot more time on this than the rest of us have. just to clarify, I think that the benefit of contracting out in a joint manner, even like, we didn't jointly go to Coombs and Dunlap and say, here's the package, and you have 2 contracts or 1 contract. I think you're talking, I don't know if you're talking about that is a good structure versus an employee. I mean, it seems like it actually creates legal problems if something goes awry in St. Helena and they sue us both jointly for harassment or something. I mean, so I think that there's joint to be done, and you can still create a bigger pie within a contract structure.
Yeah, and I'm just trying to keep things open. If it's easier to have something that's a joint contract, but if the person, say we both really love the same person, which I don't think is going to happen, but I'm open.
Not likely, but
yeah,
it could happen.
And then the person said, hey, I really want to be an employee. I'm open to that, and maybe if we get these interviews done and do something. As long, we'll worry about that when we kind of cross that bridge.
Well, I think you can keep that option, but I do remind you that as a merit system employer, we have to have job descriptions,
right.
Public salary range. All of that has to be done theoretically before you go say, Joe, you're it, or Sally.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying, if we run into that road, I mean, we'll cross it and we'll do. That's why I was asking my original question. What is it, what are the mechanics of actually putting together, this kind of request for an individual versus an employee? What does it take, and at what point can we dovetail the two? And I'm saying this type of person is probably going to be a lot less common, that we find somebody who really wants to be an employee that we both like, but.
Well, I think what town manager is trying to say is we have to decide what option we're going to go with so that we can actually craft the RFP, so that we can actually craft a job description and present that in terms of the solicitation and the marketing for this position. So if we decide as a council to go for an employee, then we move forward and we have discussions with St. Helena and how we might craft that whole.
I think the next step would be that we've all kind of agreed that we want probably somebody who's going to be a contract, and we're willing to go in with them on looking at advertising for the person. So give them our current parameters and say, is this something that you're okay with, and then we can take it to the next step.
I got a question. I mean, I don't think this would be the first time this would ever happen, right? I mean, do we have any examples, or is there any other jurisdictions we go to where they use this, or two similar jurisdictions that are?
Use which, Bill? A shared employee?
Either way.
Or,
I mean, yeah.
Well,
yeah.
The RFP for a shared services, that's not very difficult. That's a variation of what I've already been working on and drafting for you, and then we would simply, I would still recommend that the two bodies meet so you can discuss your criteria, because again, if it's going to be a shared, the 10 of you have to understand that relationship.
Mm-hmm. And I think Margie makes a very good.
See, the key on these are, all of these are doable from my perspective as a staff person working for you. I need to understand which one is your preference.
Yeah. I think Margie makes a very good point. It's going to be pretty unusual for us to land on the same individual in terms of interviews. So, I mean, it's possible, but it would definitely, like town manager says, take some meetings and establishing that criteria that we can all agree upon.
I'll also just state that was the status quo, that we were sharing service contract with a person, and we've now both.
Actually, no, that's not the status quo. The status quo is each of you individually selected Coombs and Dunlop on a different process and ended up with the same representative being assigned. So when we talk about a shared managed services where we go out and solicit, we're talking about managing jointly that relationship.
So I was stating, I guess, poorly that we have been in a position where we have been mutually using the services of the same individual. However we got there, that's what the reality was, and we coexisted with St. Helena, and they were satisfied enough to hire her as an interim solution, as were we. So I don't think it's that huge a risk necessarily. If, again, it does take finding the right person or firm, but it's certainly, we've been able to coexist with the St. Helena situation so far.
I think what I would say that the difference would be that rather than the firm managing the relationship, part of this would be that the councils establish more of how they want to manage the legal services relationship, if that makes any sense to you.
Does? How does council wish to proceed?
Well, with their St. Helena Council, its town manager leaving in a matter of weeks, have you talked to the finance director who's taken over about how you can, has she taken a look at your current RFP? And
the understanding that I have is, yes, she has a copy of the RFP and would be pretty much willing to work with whatever direction we're going.
Okay.
You're the lead on.
I mean, that is the key on this, is I do think at this point in time, Councilmember Dutton's comments are generally accurate. We will be the staff lead for doing most of the work on this.
Vice Mayor, what do you think?
Well, I stated before, I think we should certainly share the recruitment and all that that means, whether it means our town manager is doing the lion's share or not. But I hesitate to create a full-time staff position. I was just asking that the council not completely ignore that option. I think a shared services agreement can be crafted. I'd also support the idea of advertising this as a position that you'd be hired both in St. Helena and in Yountville, not individually in Yountville, and you have to make your own deal in St. Helena. I think that does restrict who we might be able to attract.
And I'm going to throw out another alternative, which is, given it may be such that you defer your final decision until you have a joint meeting with the City Council of St. Helena, because I hear you trying to accomplish a lot of flexibility and keeping options open, and we really need to talk with the potential partners. So perhaps, that's just going to slow the process down, but I think what I'm really trying to say out of this is you guys need to understand the rules of engagement that you're creating, and perhaps the feedback that I'll be giving St. Helena is you're willing to keep all options on the table and would just like to start a joint discussion, because if the two of you aren't comfortable, and you have to remember it only takes one, so if the other isn't interested or you guys don't have a confidence level of how to go about building that relationship, and I do say that that's the key here, because this is the council's appointment. This is not a contracted town engineer that reports under other operating structures within the structure. This is somebody that has to make the council, and that means 10 bodies and work with 2 managers.
Okay, I propose that we set up or arrange for a meeting with the St. Helena Town Council. Now, is this a public meeting? Is this a...
Have to be a public, open meeting. It will be an agendized special meeting.
Where?
In Yountville.
In Yountville.
Make him come to Yountville. We'll send our shuttle up for him.
That might be the first basis of discussion.
If our town manager is crafting the RFP.
Well, I guess my question is do you not think this can be generally agreed upon in a 2-on-2 meeting with 2 subcommittees rather than,
No, and I'm going to tell you why.
Well, because, they resolve land or city county borders with 2-on-2 meetings in Marion.
But
I'm just thinking
here's the situation.
We'll discuss these things.
Here's the situation. That's your all's call as a council, but here's the situation you have. If you've got 2 council members that are going out and working on an end outcome with all of the council members, my biggest concern is you're going to come back at some point and council member A is going to go, well, did you think about this and what are we going to do about this? Then you've got to explain to everybody the questions that you already went through and do that. So at a certain point, because like I say, this person, this firm, this individual has to work for both councils. And I really think it's important that if you're going to choose one of the shared managed approaches, whether it's the joint contract for services or an individual, each of the 5 of you has to be understanding and knowledgeable and comfortable with the rules of engagement for the other community. Or you'll get into that, and it could be you may end up appointing an ad hoc committee of 2 from each city that will manage that relationship, for example. But you got to start putting all those things down in paper. And then how often do you meet?
If I could just say, certainly timing is an issue. I think the reality of getting 10 members, 2 managers together in a short period of time is unlikely. I think we already have the ad hoc committee that you just referenced in place. We have now received, as the ad hoc members, your feedback from this council. I would certainly believe that St. Helens Council is doing the same thing. And if they don't have that plan for next week, we should strongly encourage that they add that to their agenda.
They do.
And then I think we, as an ad hoc group, can meet, and then if there's conflict, then we go for the 10, or for final decision, we go to the 10. But I think this initial ad hoc proposal was to come up with the ideas. Now, this meeting is to talk about those ideas, and now we have guidance as to what the ideas are that we like best. If we both agree, great. If we disagree, then we get everybody together. That would be a recommendation.
It's fine with me.
I agree with that.
That's fine with me. You could have a seriously long meeting with 10 council members.
I won't ask any questions, though.
Okay. I concur. I suggest we set up another meeting with the ad hoc committee and discuss our findings and our concerns, the rest of the council, and we'll just take it from there. Item 12, staff informational reports, community center library project status report. Is there a staff report? No? I guess not.
It's walking forward now.
Mr. Pond.
Well, there was a staff report.
Yeah, there's a
There is
little,
staff report, right here.
Well,
very brief staff report.
yeah, I saved it up.
It's probably this one right here.
That one?
Mayor,
In the
council
beginning.
members. I'm Grady Seibert with Pound Management. I think you might remember that day back at groundbreaking. So I'm going to give you a very brief report on the schedule of the project. There's a couple milestone pictures that I've provided here of some exciting things that have happened, and then also some pictures of some of the insides of the building that perhaps only Vice Mayor Dunbar and Councilmember Chilton have been able to see. And then I want to talk a little bit about the community hall, as we've torn into that building and discovered all of its creaky bones and achy wood. It makes up a significant amount of the change orders that we've incurred to date on the project. So I want to talk through the major issues on that building, and I have some pictures of that. So I'll try and be very brief. Does this click?
Yeah.
So, just kind of just a recap here. If you remember, we demolished the site. We actually did reuse all of the paving. We've reused lumber from the community hall back in the PSO. So we've made a big push to try and recycle as much as we can. And then back when we were just waiting for something to come out of the ground, this was our first big pour on the community center.
Left mouse there.
And now the geothermal system has been installed. It's all underground, so it's not a terribly exciting thing to look at. But here next week, you'll see that start to get torn apart again. All the header systems come together, and this will be your heating and cooling in the buildings. And this is our sheriff's office as it was being framed. Now, every one of you, I'm sure, has seen the sheriff's office now. There's siding on it. There's windows on it. We're actually projecting that that will be complete at the end of May and most likely occupiable by the sheriff. And I noticed Sergeant took off. Or didn't get this news, but probably in June they can move into that building. And this was back the first slab, and then the walls started to go up. And this was just some proof that the subcommittee does go out there and inspect the site. Here you can see we're in front of the new community center trying to identify the quickest path to Hurley's. Now this view, I'm sure all of you have seen from the street as you look into the project, but you probably haven't seen this, and this is up on top of the community hall looking down at the town square as it's now starting to take shape with the planters. And this is something I'm sure you haven't seen. This is actually the roof structure inside the community center, and it's really a unique roofing system. You can see here there's white pieces of steel, and here we've had to construct basically temporary columns to hold all of this in place until these glulam beams are fastened to these metal buckets, and then there's actually a tensioning system that will tie all of this together before these come out. And actually, as of yesterday, we have the roof sheeted, so it's actually closed in there. And there's our sheriff's office. And that's another view that I'm guessing you don't get to see. That's inside the project, looking at the north exposure of the community center. And now let's talk about the community hall. Whoops. I've gotten reversed somehow.
You need to go forward.
Yeah. Can you save me?
There
we go. So there were a number of items in the community hall as we tore into it that essentially needed repair, and it basically comes down to deferred maintenance on that building. So, yeah, this was Sean flexing his muscle there in the shadow. The first item that we came across was the existing sewer line that came out of the community hall and tied into the street. You can see here where the pipe is actually just completely deteriorated. It was in this condition all the way down the side of the building. So this was our first big change order on the community hall. And at the end of these pictures, I have a little spreadsheet that shows the cost of each one. Inside the community hall, this is where the new boardroom is going to be. We uncovered the ceiling because we're actually supposed to put a new ceiling in here and a new roof on top. But the ceiling joists that span the room and then the roof joists that actually run diagonally were all visibly sagging up to 1.5 inches in the center. So we had to actually tear out the roof joists and sister a new or tear out the ceiling joists and sister a new roof joist up to the top. And sistering means we took a new 2x10, jacked the roof back up somewhat close to level, and attached it to the existing. And our sagging roof saga did not stop there. This is a very difficult thing to see in any of the pictures that we have, but you can see a slight dip in the ridge line here. Well, in reality, as you go across the entire length of the community hall, if you pull a string line across that, the roof undulates up to 3 inches. So there's a lot of movement, and it's well beyond any tolerances of the new metal roof that's supposed to go on there. So we've had to figure out how to fix that, which we came up with a solution that hopefully won't be, well, town management did, and the architects and engineers and contractors worked together to come up with a solution. that hopefully won't be too expensive. And some more rotten wood as we tore the existing siding off the building. You can see here where there's just visible rot here, and then all of the old siding, there was quite a bit of it that was rotten, loose, and so we've had to go through and repair and replace that lumber. So when you look into the project, you see all this new plywood. That's all areas where there was damaged, rotten wood that had to come out. Now, also in this picture is another problem area, the windows. On the southern exposure of the windows, as we tore open the existing siding, this lumber in here is completely rotten. A number of these windows are inoperable because they would just kind of fall apart. So we've had to also look at replacing all of the windows in the community hall, the older windows. And that's how much it was. It wasn't that much, see?
Virtually nothing.
So here is a breakdown. Some of this has occurred, but if you'll notice in your staff report, the net change orders to date is $67,000. This number is greater than that. What we're trying to do with the subcommittee meetings is project out anything we see as a potential change and try to assign it a value so they can just hopefully minimize surprises. So this is everything we've identified in the community hall. Some of these numbers you'll see are very precise. Those are ones that we've actually have a solid number for. The numbers that are not so precise are estimates. So altogether, we're looking somewhere in the neighborhood of $125,000 essentially in repairing all of the old decaying pieces of the community hall. So I wanted to share that with you.
Grady, if I could just ask a question at that point. In our last meeting, correct me if I'm wrong, your feeling is that this is the end to any significant, substantial, high-cost problems that this building will present us, because you've finally torn everything down to its rotten wood and see all the issues.
Yeah, there's nothing left to uncover anywhere in that building. So there simply isn't anything else to hide in there. Mm-hmm. We've taken off all the skin that we need to take off, and replacing the windows was a big piece. So I think this is it. You may in the future, at the end of the project, decide to, as a council, you want to do something in there, maybe change a paint color or tweak something, but after all this work, your building will be fine. The other thing I wanted to bring up is the project schedule. You'll see at the bottom of your staff report the anticipated completion date that the contractor is providing us is November 6th. I want you to note that the contractual completion date is October 18th, so it does go beyond that date. However, when you look at the activities that they have going in the month of October, it's a slightly different finish than perhaps you saw at Bardesano, where everybody moved in and there's still mobile trailers out here and Solomon trucks all over the place. They're actually doing final cleanup and owner punch list items for the second half of October and moving the equipment off site. So November 6th is their date when you don't see a Swank truck in town again. And that's all I had for you.
Does council have any questions for the applicant or Pound Management?
The applicant.
Let me make a couple comments.
Sorry.
Just a couple of things, because we go through this every 2 weeks or so in the subcommittee meetings. This project has a $750,000 contingency. When we talk about change orders, that's within that contingency. So these aren't things that are outside of it. One of my great concerns has been, and I really want to commend staff and Pound Management, is to make sure that this project comes in at budget, under budget, highly preferable. And Grady just said it, we've gone through a lot of major items. Usually it's the existing things that can kind of trip you up. So, you know, I don't even think we've hit, even with potential items, kind of at that halfway mark on the contingency, which, considering how far along we are, you know, I consider very positive. So that, you know, that's a good news. Leslie is here also from Pound. I think you work for him, do you not? These guys are doing a terrific job, so you should know that. Sean, who's not here, but I have been continually impressed, and this is one of the things that is one of the great concerns is making sure that we have people in there who are really advocating on behalf of the town, not making excuses, not saying, well, you know, this is just another government project and you'll write a check. That is not what's transpiring at all. Very much what I did not want to have transpire. I know the vice mayor is in the same boat, and everybody on the council. So you know, this process is unfolding very much like it should, and doesn't mean that there can't be unexpected things come down the road. And you know, if we see something that comes forward, at least from my perspective, I think the full council would have to consider how we pay for that. But right now, that's not I don't consider that a major concern. So that's really positive.
Good.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation.
If I could just follow up on that, one of the things, and I think Grady and Sean in particular, that we work with have been doing a fantastic job as watchdogs, because we aren't presenting all of the issues that are just handled, either denied or reduced in cost. And that's been a significant savings, I think, not only with the schedule, but with the overall cost of the project. These guys know what they're doing, and they know when to flag things and when to challenge things, and it's really made a difference. And, you know, it's certainly been enlightening to me to be this embedded in the whole construction process, and I know I show my frustration when the schedule isn't what I want it to be, or we have to go out and stand on top of the planter box to see what other issues we have. But it's been very enlightening, and I do feel like, and town manager and Mike Prawl have been our in-house partners, and I do feel I share Councilmember Chilton's excitement and comfort until it's, you know, we open that door and let all the residents in. We're not going to know 100%, but I do feel like we've kept this thing in pretty good control, and the quality is showing up. Walking the inside of the buildings has been exciting also, because you really start to see the progress, because it's hard to see from Washington Street. So it's really moving forward, and they're doing a very nice job.
If I could just share with the rest of the council one example of kind of what we do for this process. This existing waste line that's in here at $16,245, when we first dug that hole with the flexing arm, saw the pipe deteriorated, we asked for a price for that work, and we were given a price of about $25,000. We felt that was too much for the scope of work, so we asked the contractors to perform it on a time and material basis, and there's already set labor wages on this project. So we then monitor and have the contractor and ourselves sign off on a daily tag every day for the exact work that was done. And so through that process, we ended up with this bill and a substantial savings on that line item. Or it's still an expense, but less of one. So we drag these two through this every 2 weeks in the subcommittee meeting.
We do need to add replacement shoes in the contingency, I think, for Councilmember Chilton and myself.
Good, thank you.
I just
Councilmember Dutton?
I had a comment, because I think this is a very important figure that we're looking at. A couple of reasons. One, we lose sight a lot that the community hall renovation was never really intended in the initial community center project. It was added on, I believe, to do it all at the same time. And I believe the 123 is significantly less than what it would have been done if what we were budgeted in the CIP down the road to put into the building. I don't have that in front of me, Mike, but I know why it looks well, it looks high here. I think probably in hindsight, that's a pretty good deal, so to speak, for what it would have cost us to do that separately had we not incorporated it into this project. So I think that should be pointed out. I think that was one of the major benefits, along with the sheriff's substation, too.
Mayor Salzman, I have a couple of comments, too.
Councilmember Mueller?
I just want to also point out that in our January 6th meeting, we approved over $71,000 for the lawn, which really isn't lawn. And at that time, it was in the staff report that said that, you know, approving this was probably going to be the largest change order for the project. But I hear what everyone's saying, but now we've got, you know, up to $123,000 extra here. And I understand that everyone's, you know, trying to do their best, but, you know, these numbers are really creeping up. And we wanted to keep that vast majority of that $750,000 to actually help us run the community hall. So, and another thing I want to point out that maybe Steve or someone could address on the Yountville Community Center budget that we just got, it looks like there is a range of the monies that are being spent. They range from like about 29 to 35%, but then the construction administration for Pound Management is like 60%. So, I mean, if we're only spending about 30% of our money, how come we've spent 60% on Pound Management fees?
That's a very easily and explainable situation, because the project is at a fixed fee on Pound Management for a duration, whereas we only pay on payables that are submitted and verified by the contractor, and the contractor has a total, and through our management structure, because they had slipped on delivering a couple of their schedules, they've not been paid. But that's what you need to look at. It's not on a time basis, because the 9.2 million construction contract's not divided up into 12 equal payments. The payment stream is based on the deliverable by the contractor, and they only get paid on that performance level. Whereas
so with that being said, with all these new construction costs that are, materials that are coming in, is this the proper ratio for the construction materials and the Pound Management fees?
Pound Management fees was set by the town to do on a fixed fee basis, on a monthly basis. So yes, they don't get paid less or more on this basis for what the kind of work that they're doing. I would also point out that we have a $750,000 contingency budget, which is a smaller than average contingency budget on a project of this. And we are making some decisions. My understanding is that, frankly, for the last 10 years as this project moved forward, we as a town avoided putting money into Community Hall because everybody said, don't do it because we're going to be doing something. So I kind of agree with some of the comments that have been made, is that approximately $125,000 of your anticipated $300,000 to $350,000 in total change orders anticipated for this project out of your $750,000 contingency budget are going to be related to the Community Hall. We all share the value of wanting to have as large a contingency remaining, and that's the objective that we're working towards.
And if I can follow up on a question you asked, because you asked a question that has been a big concern of mine, which is, I see $2.9 million of Swank construction, and it says $9.2 million, and I have no idea if that's good or bad. And one thing that has been very reassuring and illuminating, being very involved in this, is it's really actually shocking the level of detail that exists on the building specifications of this project. So when we see this $67,000 of applied contingency versus 9.2, that means the other 9.2 or so has met different targets. And we haven't gotten to a point where we're just spending money and we'll get to the end and say, oh, we're $300,000 or $400,000 short. I mean, it really is a line item by line item project, which, you know, I have to say in hindsight, and maybe it's one of those benefits of the design costs of this project were pretty substantial. The flip side of that is that may be one of the reasons that so far the contingency is in good shape, because there's so many details that were worked out. This is not design build, I think, as it's called, where it's here's what we want, let's go and sort of see how it works, and then not what I'm doing with my deli. So, that's the good news of that is this 32% of the balance is almost a meaningless number in many ways. It really goes to a line item by line item and say, on this one, we're over and we're not. And then there's more detail that really takes the total potential or likely probably to about almost $400,000 right now. So that 81,000 is what's been booked. But we know of about 400 out of 750 that most likely will be used. And then as we get closer to that 750 mark, we start to get a little more nervous. And I don't mean nervous like there's nothing to do about it. I don't want to say that we'll just help.
So I'm not going to hold you to this, so just your ballpark right now, you still think that we're going to have about half of that 750 left?
I will promise that we will have $1. Anything above that is going to be good.
Well, and I also want to point out that our contingency can be applied for a number of things. It cannot be used for operating. So we have to, and that's because the bond financing structure, it can be used for a future equipment replacement reserve, things like that, but it cannot nor should be used from an operating standpoint because the operating costs need to have their identifiable. But I mean, our goal is to have it so that it's going to go to positive things. And I think that is also one of the positive things about being able to spend money on the community hall building. Community hall was built, from what I can gather from research, in 1922. The town's done pretty good with its ownership of community hall in terms of it, but it's a beautiful lady that needs a little refining. And I think what this project, where we're going to be at this point, is you're going to have new windows, energy efficient windows. You're going to have a new roof. You're going to have a building that's going to match the new building in an aesthetic and in a function and in an energy efficient design, as opposed to leaving it there and saying, well, we'll come back in a few years later and we'll do the roof at $38,000 and we'll come back and do the windows at $52,000 and we've got re-siding and oops, we got to do new geothermal and we got to go dig up the parking lot. We've accomplished a lot of renovation and by treating it as a site. And so, I mean, I'm optimistic, and I will say that we're going to come in under budget. I'm not going to predict that it's $350,000, but I am very confident that we are going to be under budget.
Good. Thank you. Thank you to Pound Management. You're doing a great job. Thank you to the subcommittee. You're also doing a good job in staying on top of this project. Item 13, council reports and comments. Napa County Flood Control did meet this afternoon. Well, prior to that, actually, the Napa County City Selection Committee met, as we usually do before flood control. And there was an issue of appointing 2 replacement LAFCO members, Local Agency Formation Commission, for those of you who are not familiar with the acronym, and to a new term of office. And one was representing the Down Valley seat as an alternate was Joan Bennett with American Canyon for a term commencing May 4th, 2009 to expire in May of 2013. The other was the Up Valley representative that represents Calistoga, St. Helena, and Yountville. Yountville was in the rotation, and so therefore, based on the recommendations of this council, we appointed Councilmember Chilton to that term commencing May 4th, 2009 and expiring May 6th, 2013. And other than that, there was no reportable action from that meeting. The flood control met this afternoon. It was a difficult meeting in that we had to determine, I believe, 8 resolutions of necessity. There was some public comment, and it was, they were all resolved and they were all approved. We got an update from the subcommittee that went to Washington, D.C., and they're confident that we will hopefully receive the necessary funding. They earmarked $92 million for the Napa flood project. So earmarked me is one thing, and actually receiving the funding is quite another. So we all know what earmarks mean. And I'll save the rest of my comments after other reports and comments. Anybody?
Oh, sorry. You want to go?
Yeah, I attended the board meeting for the WIC board, which is the Watershed Information Center and Conservancy. That was held on Thursday, March 26th. And the only thing I wanted to, it was a very interesting meeting, but I won't bring up all the really interesting stuff. But the main thing I think that the town citizens need to know is that WIC will have a major booth at Earth Day, which will be held April 25th at the Napa Valley College, and that's going to be from 10 to 2. And our very own Bonnie Buss is the event coordinator for Earth Day.
Thank you. Councilmember Chilton, any reports, comments?
NCTPA met on the 18th of March. Just a couple of items for that. We got our normal Caltrans and also the MTC update. Again, a lot of talk on stimulus package. Bay Area got $500 million in total. Napa County as a whole is going to see about $2.7 million for transit and $3 million for roads, which will go to the MTC's general philosophy right now of fix it first, which is just plenty to fix. So I think that's a positive. In addition, the $1 million for the Yountville bike path segment is on top of that. Much of that may be thanks to former MTC Chairman Bill Dodd for getting some money for Napa County. A couple other things. One, there's a Napa's transportation future. This very slim document of lots of interesting things. The NCTPA, along with a lot of public input and a public commission, is developing a look forward on what it is that Napa County should be doing over the next decades. How do we want to see the transportation future of this county evolve, considering the actually myriad of problems that we do have. One thing that I thought was exciting, and it came up as much in the discussion as it did really in this report, was I think a little bit of renewed talk about the idea of is Napa County, can we look down the road and see some sort of transit rail system in the county, which to me would be, really probably a game changer for this county, which also means it would be tremendously difficult and costly to do. So I think it's nice that that's being talked about. And there's a lot of other things in here. You can get on the NCTV website. I'm trying to see if there's anything else that was the main topic of discussion, and we'll be there soon again.
That's right. Councilmember Dutton, any reports, comments?
Just a couple things. Attended. You can mention the vet's birthday.
Well, go ahead.
Okay. Well, I think this last week, quite a number of events up at the Vets Home for their 125th anniversary, and great participation from the town. All of the council members, I think, were there at one time, and the mayor, vice mayor, town manager did some nice presentations. I think it was very well accepted. It was a busy day for the mayor, and she won't say it, but she had to throw out the opening pitch for opening day. Last Saturday, did a nice job, as always. It was nice to see, I don't know, there was probably 80-plus little ones running around out there, and they had a good time. The only other thing I'd like to just mention, if it doesn't go by, that the initial meeting of the Parks and Community Services Commission will be on April 16th, I think at 6 o'clock, right in this room. So it might be something somebody might want to attend, especially since it'll introduce all of the new members on that particular commission.
Good. Vice Mayor?
Two very quick, just in addition to the 125th anniversary events that Councilmember Dutton mentioned, two things that stood out for me: the photographs that they enlarged and put out on display at the Lincoln Theater lobby were pretty amazing history of the home. And also, there was a documentary that was put together 30 years ago, 40 years ago? 30 years ago, that it was quite charming to watch some of the events they used to have in the last 125 years, previous state governors, and just all the events and interviews with vets, and it was really a fun documentary to see. The only other thing I'd like to mention tonight is just recognizing the Chamber of Commerce and the entire town for the Taste of Yountville. I know it was several weeks ago, but still wanted to recognize that and appreciate the volunteer effort that our community brings forward. It's part of what makes us what we are.
Good, thank you. I just have a few other announcements. I received a letter from the county. The term for the of Renata Halliday for the Measure A Financial Oversight Committee is going to expire this June, and they're asking the town to recommend an individual to serve on that Financial Oversight Committee for a new term expiring June 30th, 2012. The committee's purpose and charge is to inform the public regarding expenditure of the flood protection sales tax proceeds that are generated as a result of the enactment of Section 9, Ordinance 1 of the Napa County Flood Protection and Watershed Improvement Authority, known as Measure A. So this is a really important position. I will leave the application with the town clerk, so if anyone's interested in that position, you might want to request the application, but they're asking for the town to recommend an applicant, and of course Renata has the opportunity to reapply, and they would be happy to submit or to accept her reapplication without the necessity of her filling out another application. So I don't know if they've heard from her or not. So that is available. Also, I don't know if you're aware, but the Napa Superior Court's in the process of forming a 2009-2010 Napa County Grand Jury, and they need to appoint 19 Napa County citizens to the grand jury, and the term of office will run from July 1, 2009 to June 30, 2010. This is an interesting committee to serve on, and essentially the grand jury is the community watchdog, and they really serve an important function in the county. So if you're interested in that, you can get more information by contacting the county, the court executive officer at 299-1110, and you can also request applications on site at the court's website, which is www.napacourt.com. And the deadline for filing those applications will be April 30th. And finally, I lent my name to the Wildlife Rescue Center of Napa County. They're looking for a new location, and they are having a benefit on Sunday, April 19th, from 3 to 7 p.m., and it will be located at the Silos facility at 500 Main Street. That's the old historic Napa Mill. And admission to that event is $45 in advance and $50 at the door. Tickets will be available at the Wine and Cheese Merchants inside the Oxbow. This is an exciting opportunity for the citizens of Napa to really step up and help to create or recreate the Wildlife Rescue Center of Napa County, which was closed as a result of the flood project property acquisition. And I know I've taken small critters there in the past, and they've nursed them back to health and found good homes for them. So it's kind of an important organization, and you can get more information if you just if you want to visit their website, which is www.napawildliferescue.org. And thank you, Councilmember Dutton, for mentioning my stellar strike pitch over home plate. Actually, it was a little high and outside, but when I was warming up, I threw a number of strikes.
Kids swung anyway.
It's a wonderful. Yeah, they do. It was really a neat day. It's my favorite day of the year, opening day for Little League, and it's just so much fun. And they're so cute in their little uniforms, and they have such a good time, and the parents have such a good time, and I really want to thank all the sponsors, the coaches, the referees, and everybody involved in making it a special day for Yountville's kids. And I think that's all I have.
I had maybe one thing more, Mayor, if I could. Speaking of little kids, I think it's this Saturday, if I'm not mistaken, Ken, is the Easter egg hunt day.
Right, yes.
I don't know how you stand on Easter eggs, but if you have to put a plea out for people, I noticed it was in a news bulletin, and anybody that could supply 2 or 3 dozen colored eggs. I know your source is sort of in turmoil this year with the town hall being down and what have you.
We don't have
so.
the facility to dye that many eggs, so we were
Right.
hoping that people will help us and dye some eggs and bring them by on Friday.
Where are they delivering the eggs?
To the Community Services Department.
Okay.
Yes.
Councilmember Chilton?
Yeah, one thing I actually was going back through the meeting. I would, I had some discussions this week with former council member Rosa and Donna Hine about the issue they brought up regarding our zoning and what the options are to ensure that the mobile home parks, the retirement parks in town stay as they are. And I would like to ask that the council also authorize or give staff some direction that that is an appropriate use of time. And I would like to get some background and have a report someday in the future of, I know we have zoning for those mobile home parks existing. There's a lot of lawsuits in California right now. Roanoke Park's a good example. American Canyon has some lawsuits about preserving those, the kind of mix. And I think it's an extremely important issue that we should take a look at here in Yountville. So I would like the council to request the council would have agreement on directing staff in that manner. I would like to just get some background information on what our current zoning is, what our legal options are in terms of protecting the parks as retirement parks, what some of the pitfalls might be as there's some legislation or some lawsuits going pretty high up in the state right now.
Okay. Is council comfortable with that?
Yeah, one thing I'll just add to that is our status, because I haven't looked at this for some time. It was an issue a few years ago, whether we relinquished the authority of enforcement of the mobile home parks back to the state, because the town would have an opportunity to take control of that, is my understanding.
Well, it's also my understanding if it's in our general plan, that's going to really help protect them a lot too. So I think as staff looks into that, that should help.
And
or, an overlay on that is really going to, they can't touch it if it's in our general plan.
Well, I would agree that to some degree. I think this is probably an issue considering some events locally, and that we need to take a look at that pretty quickly.
There are some broader things, and simply to say that if it's in the general plan, it can't be touched, that's not a...
No, if it's in the general plan and you've got protection in there, and I haven't specifically looked, then that goes a long ways, is what I like to clarify.
It does, and there are some other tools that, for example, one that you may not think about, which is if you actually have an ordinance that creates the process for conversion, and you have a conversion fee and a structure, there's a lot of ways that something like that can actually help to protect the current status quo rather than actually relate to the conversion, because some communities have put language like that in that requires any conversion basically to qualify as new impact fees.
Right.
And so there's a range of things that we can look at doing, because from a zoning standpoint, the fact that it's senior age restricted is not quite, it's zoned as a mobile home park, the layering.
Right.
And we'll work together on doing some overview And that is very different than the topic of mobile home rent control, which is a very different topic as well, although often intermixed by the same people.
You comfortable with that, Councilmember Dutton?
Well, I think, obviously, since I live in the mobile home park, I would be recused from any discussions in those matters.
That would be a true statement.
All right. Okay. Future agenda items. Fire and Sheriff's Public Safety Quarterly Reports, Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, CAFR, and Housing Element Presentation. Are there any other agenda items other than the mobile home park discussion and possibly
A few ad hoc committee meetings.
a few ad hoc committee meetings? Okay, closed session. We will now adjourn to closed session, and you're welcome to stick around for re-adjournment, but I doubt if there will be any reportable action, so.
That is correct. There will be no reportable action.
And the conferences with labor negotiator pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.6, agency negotiator, Steve Rogers, employee organization, Yountville Employee Association, and non-represented management employees.
Thank you.